Thank you.
Okay. Call the regular meeting of the Ojai City Council to order, and will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Johnston.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Blatz.
Here.
Councilmember Francina.
Here.
Councilmember Haney.
Here.
Councilmember Wyrick.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum. James, will you lead us in the pledge?
Right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, James. Okay, approval of the agenda. Any changes in the agenda? Hearing none, seeing none. Okay, the agenda stands approved as submitted. Presentation, a proclamation recognizing Serendipity Toys 40th anniversary. James?
Thank you. And we're going to try to do something a little different here due to COVID. We're trying to get creative. Mayor Pro Tem Blatz had actually notified us that Serendipity had its 40th anniversary. So we put our brains together to come up with a way we could honor them with a proclamation in these strange times. So with that, James Hahn, I believe you are prepared to play a video that we created. Hello, I'm City Manager James Vega, and tonight we're going to try to do something a little different for tonight's council meeting. We are here with Joe at Serendipity Toys, who are celebrating their 40th anniversary in Ojai. And Joe's been kind enough to offer to walk us through the store, and we're going to give him a proclamation from the City of Ojai and the City Council and the Mayor of Ojai. Thank you for joining us for this walkthrough.
Hello, everybody. Really, they say time goes quickly, and it's pretty hard to believe. It's been 40 years since, over 40 years since we were given the keys to the suite. We came inside and said, what do? We don't know what to do. Actually, it was 1979, and my daughter, we had two boys, older, was almost 2. We live up in the forest. My wife had to take care of the daughter. She was getting restless, go back to school, teach. And she had mulled over a toy store, not seriously. And then some of you may remember, if you're in Ojai, that the bendy ride hours, what's the name of it? No, suddenly forgot. But anyway, theatrical group came, and their first production was, they had a song, said, don't wait, just do it. My wife decided that night. She was bothering me. I was an engineer, bothering me. Finally, I said, okay, look around. She called me the next day and said, we're an escrow. No money, no experience in toys, and that's how we started. Yeah. So anyway.
All right, and you're going to walk us through?
Sure, I'll walk you through. It's been quite a change ordeal with the pandemic. We weren't exactly sure what to expect when we were able to open up, and business has been brisk. People were waiting for, among other things, puzzles.
Yeah, puzzles are flying, right?
Yeah, puzzles, yeah, basically we're flying off the shelf. People were calling all the time, and also games. So we kind of had an adult audience all of a sudden. And of course, we're a children's store.
Kids at heart.
We also sell lots of toys, but also the kicker, craft items. We've always carried craft items.
Oh yeah.
All of that, but with the kids locked up and everything, it's been a big push for crafts and that sort of thing, especially the ones that are not too complicated, where the kids can do it themselves because they're at home all the time.
Mm.
And also, a lot of them are in school on the computer, and the first thing the parents want is no more computers, so they want hands-on materials, and we're selling tons of things like that. Yeah. And
Birthday cards. I didn't realize you had birthday cards.
oh yeah. Of course, we quote, try not to have a girl's side and a boy's side, but still, we refer to this as my side, and the other side is her side. Unfortunately, it's dark over there because an hour ago we were supposed to have an electrician here to put in a new lighting system. And
Yeah, thank you again for taking the time and doing this when you have other stuff going
Oh,
on.
yeah.
We appreciate it.
and so just to give my wife's side equal time, we've got gifts, a Russian doll. She's Russian. And it's crowded, but lots of puppets, stuffed animals, the train sets.
I never noticed the Russian dolls.
Yeah.
Those are cool.
And so, yeah, people say we have to stay here. You know, I retired from engineering in 2003, and we thought we were going to move on, but you know, we live up in the forest, so we figured no neighbors. This is our social life. So feel free to come in and socialize with us anytime.
Thank you. Thanks again, Joe, for the tour of the store. And we are here today to issue a proclamation in celebration of the 40th anniversary to Joe and Lily. And Joe just told me that the sign was painted by his then 15-year-old son, and which is also another recognizable aspect of serendipity. So we're standing here in front of the store and the sign here, here in Ojai. And so on behalf of the city council and mayor, who unfortunately due to the pandemic, aren't able to attend, on behalf of the city council and the mayor, the city's issuing this proclamation. Whereas Serendipity Toys was established in 1979 by owners Joe and Lily Bartholomew, and whereas Serendipity Toys is a family-owned and operated business located at its original location in downtown Ojai for 40 years, and whereas Joe and Lily desired to offer the community unique and high-quality playthings to engage children of all ages in beneficial play, and whereas Serendipity Toys donates merchandise to local schools and charitable organizations that support creative diversion. And whereas the city of Ojai is proud to celebrate Serendipity Toys on the occasion of its 40th anniversary. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that normally we say I, John F. Johnston, but I got Mayor Johnston's permission on his behalf to say that I, City Manager James Vega of the city of Ojai, on behalf of the mayor and the city council, do hereby commend Serendipity Toys on its 40th anniversary, and we hope many more. And I'll give this to you, Joe.
Okay.
And with the coronavirus cell
Thank you, James, for doing it and filling in for me. And thank you, Ryan, for making sure that we were aware of that. Really important to do those things during a pandemic where people have suffered so much and struggled with their businesses. Susan?
That's Ryan's favorite store growing up.
Yeah, I love Serendipity. I took my son, who's 52 years old now, there, and I've spent many, many happy hours there with my older granddaughter, because they just allow you to come in and play. Mm-hmm. You know, we always buy something, but they have a train track with the Thomas trains. If you're a parent, then you know about the Thomas trains.
Thomas the train, yeah.
I have them all. So, yeah, thank you, Joe and Lily. It's so wonderful that that store is there, still there.
Yeah, I have kids both that are 50 plus. And my two kids we took down there too. So be sure that a copy of that's given to Wendy over at the museum. It's kind of a momentous occasion with you.
Yeah, we'll do that. Thank you.
Joe's a pretty incredible human being, and their story is amazing.
I was talking to Joe a couple weeks ago. I mean, James landed. We got this done relatively quickly. And in all fairness, I think it's their 41st year, but it doesn't sound as cool on the paperwork. But how amazing! That store is again older than I am, which I blew my mind when I found that out from Joe. I've been going there since we used to at Ojai Valley School. We used to there would be a town day where you got to walk to town after school, and everybody would get a couple bucks. And it was supposed to be for food and supplies and what you needed, and everybody hit Serendipity first. And there's been a lot of money from a lot of young people spent there. And when Joe told me that they had been there over 40 years, it blew my mind, and it reminded me that it was only a few months ago Toys R Us filed bankruptcy, and Toys R Us has come and gone, and Serendipity stays. So I just think that there is something to be said about that and the quality of what they've brought. And I can say that I have good friends who are taking their children there. I think it's it's probably a 4 or 5 generation old toy store, which is pretty neat for Ojai. So congratulations, Joe and the family and everybody else. And 40 more years. We hope you're there forever.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you all for doing that, James. And
Wonderful.
and I guess was Luis the cameraman?
Yeah, Luis was cameraman and editor, so he definitely put in
We'll give him credit in the crawl. We don't have any crawls, but we'll work on that for the next go around.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. We are to the consent calendar.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, got a motion to approve. Nobody wants to pull anything?
Nope.
Good for you. Okay, great. Okay, it's moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. Okay, the consent calendar is approved. That takes us to discussion item number 2. James, would you?
Yes.
It's a public hearing.
Yeah, so this is a public hearing, and it's a public hearing. It was continued from the last council meeting on fences, hedges, and walls. We brought a proposed ordinance that would regulate fences, walls, hedges, and screening at the last meeting, but it was continued to this meeting for some modifications to be made. So the ordinance, in brief, does a few things, which is it allows, or it sets fence, walls, screening, and hedges standards. But this version of it, what's changed from the last meeting is it separated hedges from fences, walls, and screening. Previously, they had been treated similarly, and in this ordinance, they are now at tonight's meeting, they will be kind of separated out. So fences, walls, and screens under this ordinance could be 4 feet high in the front yard up to the property line. This ordinance also creates a process to be able to expand that to up to 6 feet high if needed for animals, and that would be subject to the review of the community development manager. This ordinance, like the one from a couple of weeks ago, creates a zone clearance process at a reduced $50 fee that would allow a person to come apply to get a fence, wall, or screen permitted. And when that was reviewed, that's when those, as I mentioned before, the exception or the extension for animals could be permitted. Another change that this ordinance makes from 2 weeks ago is that it limits, or it allows hedges, treats hedges separately from fences, walls, and screens, and it allows hedges at the front property line and limits them based on if they are a visibility issue or a hazard or a nuisance, but does not otherwise limit hedges.
And also encroaching on the right of way.
Yeah, and right, and that I included that in hazard, but yes, if it encroaches on the right of way. So
James, I'm sorry. Could you repeat that? Was it safety, nuisances,
visibility, hazards, safety hazards, nuisance, and encroachment on the public right of way would be reasons that a hedge would be potentially, that there'd be potential enforcement from the city. But it doesn't otherwise.
Point to that, James.
Yep.
The hedging standard is designed under this proposed ordinance to be tested by the community development director or community development manager and public works director as applicable on a case-by-case basis, rather than establishing the current absolute 3-foot height maximum in the corner for hedges. This allows a hedge to exist unless it is a safety hazard and nuisance, harmful to the public's health or safety, encroaches the public right-of-way, or impacts visibility. So it's intended to create some more flexibility for hedges independent of fences, walls, and screening.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so it separates hedges. Most of the other requirements that we discussed last meeting with the last version are still in there. It still prohibits chain link fencing unless approved by a minor CUP. It still prohibits barbed wire unless approved through a conditional use permit. It still creates the zone clearance process with the reduced $50 fee. But what it does differently from the ordinance 2 weeks ago is it separates hedges, as we just discussed, and allows for that additional 2 feet front fence for animals. So that's basically it.
And could I add something, James?
Yeah.
It also stipulates, and Matthew, correct me if I'm wrong, the discretion of the community development director can also be modulated by resolution of council
Yes.
in the case of hedges.
Is there some place in town where we do need to have barbed wire and razor wire?
Well, we have some at the over there on Bryant.
Yeah, we have
around the
some on
Evans.
Bryant.
Yeah, and there's some on
commercial property.
the street right here above the corporation yard. But I was just
There's significant barbed wire around Soul Park Golf Course.
Yeah.
And there's all kinds of places. I mean, and most of it's from, the dark ages, right? But there was cattle and horses and, all that kind of stuff. But there is a significant amount, although it's not, I don't think it's put in modernly very often, but there is a lot in the city, more than we would probably expect. But most of it's put in the 50s and 60s.
okay.
You don't want to.
How about razor wire? That sort of smacks of prisons.
Yeah, I don't see a lot of razor wire. I mean, if it's real razor wire, there's also, it's funny. I was in Atascadero a couple months ago, and there was up on a wall. There was a thing. There's like 40 different kinds of barbed wire. I had no idea.
Oh, yeah.
Back in the day, every Cowboys had a different way to twill the stuff every time. But
They have
I agree,
museums,
razor wire is a little different. That's usually a high security type of situation versus an animal.
I've been to a barbed wire museum, Ryan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
James,
Yeah, all different kinds.
the better of the first one. Really caught on him. Open range didn't exist anymore. Randy.
I just had a couple questions for clarification.
Mm-hmm.
So the standard now on front yard fencing and walls is 48 inches. Am I correct?
As proposed under this ordinance.
And if someone wants to exceed 48 inches, they can file for a minor variance? Is that what I'm hearing?
Essentially, we don't call it that, but that's essentially what it is.
Okay, and then it's the same variance that someone would have if they had a wood fence or a block wall on the side or the backyard property lines. And if they wanted to exceed 6 feet, they'd have to come in and file for additional clearance to go to 7 feet or 8 feet. Am I correct?
Yes.
And so we're doing the same thing in front yards for organic living materials. Has to be, is the term here, versus organic?
Well, that up to 6 feet is not organic materials. That's the ones we're talking about under that animal exception is fences, walls, and screens, not the hedges.
For hedges, there is no numeric height limit.
Mm-hmm. Hedges are treated separately, no limit.
So is a hedge a screen by definition?
No.
Is it not put in someone's property intentionally? So are they using it as a hedge, as a screening device, or are they planting a hedge to plant a hedge in their front yard for what?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I need to understand this better because I'm lost on if we have codes for fences and wall heights and things of that nature already. Why would we not want to have the same thing for the front yard?
Yeah.
Again, if we moved it up to 48 inches, why would we not take it to whatever the allowable heights that we allow on our existing codes? Why aren't we doing that?
Well, I can tell you that from my point of view, if I could answer that, because Susan and I worked on this, the feedback we get from the community is they want hedges treated differently. That seems to be pretty clear. And they grow and they change.
Yeah.
And I think the idea of having some standards with other than a set height limit makes sense for something that changes every year and grows. Plus, we've heard a lot of feedback from the community about the positive impacts of a plant compared to something constructed in terms of climate change and all of those issues. So, Susan, I'll let you take that, but that's the feedback I'm getting from the community.
Yeah, I agree with that. Also, I believe we defined hedges as living material because there are all kinds of artificial hedges and those won't fly.
Has to be growing.
It has to contribute to the health of the community. It has to provide, it should be.
So you still haven't really answered the questions about heights.
Yeah.
Why would we want a 15-foot, 20-foot hedge?
Yeah. It's the same question I had.
Help me to understand that.
Yeah.
Bill, especially in the past, you've made real clear comments regarding.
I've been very clear, but I'm compromising with respect to the feedback I'm getting from the community, basically. And I think that they want to treat something that's a hedge differently than something constructed. And so the idea is to put a performance standard on, also subject to additional council resolution in terms of, but not in terms of hedges, but nevertheless, not having a set height limit for a hedge that doesn't encroach on the right of way, doesn't become a safety hazard, not a danger to health and safety, in other words.
Yeah. That's
all right.
correct.
I'm just,
Yeah.
I just disagree with it, but that's just me.
Mayor.
Ryan.
Randy, I don't know if it helps your question, but there are some common law standards for the height of trees, hedges, and other screening. That's called a spike fence, and over 10 feet, you get into potential liability. Even though it's not in the code, there's a common law part of that does exist, but that's still not till you get to 10 feet. My question is, why, with the visibility intersections, that has been the main problem where hedges have occurred. That didn't change, right? You guys didn't actually change anything for hedges in those intersections. No. Is there any idea the idea that there's stop signs, different situations? I mean, we run into this every time. The main hedges that were objected to being cut down when the council tried to do this and declared an emergency number of years back were not only screening hedges and everything else. They were corner hedges. There were other hedges. There's this one size fits all approach to all the different neighborhoods in Ojai has never worked. We haven't gotten much public input on this. I know you guys have, but we haven't seen it, at least at the council meetings. And there's nothing in here that accounts for the intersection visibility if there's a stop sign. There's nothing in here that accounts for those other situations. It just says if it interferes with it. I thought that was something that was being discussed.
Well, I believe it still has the traffic visibility area. I mean, it says negatively impacts the intersection visibility area required for public safety standards compliance, as said in section 10.2-803.
Right.
That's in the list.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying, Bill, is that there's no exception to that. If there's a four-way stop at that intersection, if those hedges are there, those intersections are where the enforcement issue occurred more than they occurred in the setback areas when this council declared an emergency on it previously, because it was after notice of enforcement, after passing the rule, when public became really upset. And then
I was there at the time, Ryan, and one thing I'd like to just clarify on that is the council directed looking please at the dangerous the situations on intersects for visibility. not necessarily dangerous, but just visibility issues. What happened was that staff went out, none of the staff that's here now, but the accurate way of stating this is staff went out and started telling everybody, no matter what, whether it was a visibility or problem or not, that they had to cut hedges down. That's what provoked the large reaction.
But right, but I mean, even in this, it doesn't give an exception. If you're in the 25-foot setbacks areas and you're over 3 feet, even with a hedge, there's any negative impact. This reads as a scintilla of negative impact, meaning any negative impact found by the director could be exclusionary for that area. And I'm just saying, like, we whittled this down. I appreciate that the makers of this motion and why we're reviewing it, because I agree with that. But I'm not seeing the hedges treated differently in the context of a significant area where most of the problems occurred in the past.
Well, that's why the language is in there saying director discretion, or as if we don't like what ends up being with director discretion, city council resolution can direct specifics in terms of the interpretation.
Well, let me ask this then. Maybe I'm interpreting it wrong, Bill. And in all fairness, I appreciate that answer. So Matt, if you don't mind me directing this at you.
Sure.
Matt, in that section under hedges, number 5, right? So we're on 10.2.805E subsection 5, negatively impacts the intersection visibility pursuant to 2.803. Is that subject to some discretion on the director? Because I read that as being, if there's any negative impact, or if it quote unquote negatively impacts the intersection visibility, that the director has no discretion at that point.
I do read that as having director discretion.
Okay.
Because negatively impacts doesn't mean has any impact. It means a negative impact rises to a level as to create something in the same character as the other 4 items on the list, and harm to the public, injurious to public health or safety.
So when I said a scintilla of negativity, that would be incorrect. It would be what would be, and I know this is a little bit legal, but I mean, what would be the burden of negativity for the director to look at and try and assess?
I think the burden would be, is it likely to create a safety hazard?
Right. Yeah.
So for most drivers in most situations. And in the course of that, while not expressed, the community development manager evaluating it would, I expect, take into account the characteristics of each intersection. Are there stop signs? Is it, for the few that we have, signalized? If not signalized, does it have curb extensions or not? Does it have, what's its character? Would I expect to be taken into account? The proposal from the subcommittee as embodied in this ordinance is to, as noted, delete the absolute height limit for hedges and replace it with this standard allowing assessment of whether it creates a negative impact upon health, traffic safety, and health and safety. And if it does, then require enforcement subject to appeal up the chain. And
I would say this then, Matt. I mean, I agree with the policy. I'm on favor of that. But reading it in the actual language, I'm not seeing that being conveyed. It says any of the following situation, and number 5 is negatively impacts the intersection visibility area required. It doesn't say negatively impacts the public safety. It doesn't say negative impacts under this it says negatively impacts the visibility. And I don't read any discretionary ability in the director in that. And maybe I'm interpreting that wrong.
I
but
think
maybe there's
some
some clarity that made in a couple words that would make that clear.
Yeah, I think maybe a couple words emphasizing that what you just said, Matthew, is indeed clearly incorporated in E5 would make sense.
so I would suggest adding 2 things. One would be at the beginning of the sentence, or this sub clause, significantly negatively impacts the intersection visibility area required for public safety standards compliance in the judgment of the director.
Yeah.
So
that works for me.
That we're testing it not as any scintilla of negativity, but rather is it a substantial harm?
Aren't there some public works standards for sight distance?
Yes.
And isn't that what we're talking about, is that if it interferes with sight distance and creates a safety issue, which is what sight distance is to protect, then you apply the criteria, and hedges can't interfere with that just because they're a living,
right,
growing, whatever the definition is.
Right.
But Johnny, my question is really like, what if there's a four-way stop, or there's other mitigating factors, or there's some, because if it's 37 inches in those 25-foot triangle,
Right.
then the way this reads to me is that as soon as it hits 36 plus inches anywhere in that triangle, it's not allowed.
That's not the intent.
Okay, and I'm just asking, and I agree.
But isn't that just, it's not saying that you can't have a hedge there, it just has to be below a certain level so that the sight distance is not affected.
Right.
Well, yeah, no, what it's actually saying is that the director has the discretion. If we modified the language, and what I'm hearing from Mr. Summers, that it would be that if the director feels that it significantly negatively impacts the visibility there, given all the considerations, that in the 25-foot triangle, even if it was over the minimum height of 36 inches, it might be okay if it had other mitigating factors, because then it didn't significantly impact the public safety portion of the visibility standard.
Yeah, like maybe
the reason
road
I asked
is
this
higher.
is that, right?
Are you saying if it was a regulated intersection, that the standard or the...
Yeah, because the reality is, I've looked at a lot of these intersections, and most of the ones that would fall under this fall in what I call the downtown square, which is Signal Street, Summer Street, Kenyatta Street, and Ojai Avenue, right? And a lot of them, those properties are all chopped up and different. In fact, a bunch of our council members live in this area. And in that area, that's where there was a lot of enforcement issues and stuff before. So I'm very familiar with that. And I happen to have moved in there since then, but I didn't before, but I was very aware of it. I know that in that area, there's this question, and I know there's public discussion and outcry saying, hey, how can we handle both of these? I agree. There's situations where one size fits all doesn't work. I don't want to see the hedges that, heck, I'll be honest, I put on Facebook after this law passed the first time, and there were people who literally took weed whackers to the bottom of their hedges and left them in the street. And it upset a lot of people because that wasn't really what the city wanted or what the intent was.
Remember the hedge picture book?
Okay, Ryan.
Right, and I don't know, some of them are, some situations.
Is the language that Matt proposed as an amendment satisfy you?
Yes, absolutely. That's what
Okay.
I'm saying. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so for purposes of discussion, I'm going to make a move to approve.
And I know Randy has a comment.
Okay, just a second. We have a hand up, and I
I'm
want to
sorry.
go to Randy, who had his hand up.
Well, I'm
My
trying to be
mistake.
polite here in these discussions, but it seems like all we want to do is step on each other, and I just don't.
Okay, well,
I
you were
apologize.
polite, so now you have the floor.
But
Go ahead.
I'm just trying to say that's why I asked originally: are we all on the screen so that we can all behave?
We are now.
So again, you still haven't, guys. You still haven't. It seems again once again we're creating something that has a tremendous amount of ambiguity, that has a ton of gray, that is going to have a lot of, well, you say one thing, Mr. Grant or Mr. Vega, and now I'm going to go appeal it. Now we're going to have another hearing. Why are we doing this? Why are we creating such, I'm just lost on it, you guys. I'm completely lost on
Health,
it.
safety, and welfare is the goal, Bill.
To answer your question, Randy, and I apologize for being too quick on the draw there. Remember, what we're trying to do is to fix years of suspended and ambiguous enforcement of an existing code. At the time I first took office, you remember, it was the short-term rental thing that had been suspended enforcement for 6 years. I think it's corrosive to the community to have long-term suspended enforcement. So what we're trying to do is to modify this code in a way that we can feel comfortable going forward. And I just feel like this is a way of taking a step in that direction. We're trying to end this long-term suspension enforcement with something that makes at least some degree of sense. And we have a council resolution option in there for clearing up problems that maybe come from, instead of having an absolute height limit, having standards that are applied to the situation. So this is an attempt to try to move forward by having standards applied to the situation and lift this long-term enforcement suspension.
I think that this is a subject of a public hearing, correct, Matt?
Yes.
I think we should open the hearing now and see what the public has to say before we try to solve every or answer every question. Okay, the public hearing is now open. Gail, do we have anybody that is called in or submitted a card?
No,
None.
none.
We have one, I thought.
Yeah, we received one written comment from Bill Miley.
Yeah,
And that comment was
Positive.
positive.
positive. Okay, well, then we don't have any more comments besides Bill. Thanks, Bill, for sending in your comment. We appreciate that. That's Bill Miley. Okay, we will close the hearing if there are no further people in the queue. Okay, the hearing is now closed. Now we need a motion of some sort so we can start moving this to a conclusion. Randy, you have your hand up.
Well, after the motion, are we going to have a little more discussion or
Yes, normally you have your discussion after the motion. In Ojai, you guys all convinced me that you weren't going to do that, so we have it both ways.
Well, I was,
Mr. Mayor, you only have a couple more weeks to have to worry about that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, then
Appreciate the guidance moving forward.
well, I will offer the motion as to introduce this for first introduction. I mean, for first reading, as amended by Mr. Summers.
I'll second.
Okay, and that was in regard to Ryan's concern that there be more procedure.
Yeah, I'll just say subject to my amendment because I'm not sure Mr. Summers is allowed to amend.
The anti-scintilla.
I know we all know what you meant, Bill.
I'm just described.
Okay, we have a motion in a second. Now we will have discussion. Randy.
So again, I just want to be clear on this, you guys. We have regulations regarding fences and walls. And what you're saying is now I can go into my property and I can plant anything that I want, let it grow as tall as I want, unless it comes under Ryan's 10-foot rule, which is not anywhere in this ordinance. But is that what I'm hearing? So,
Or unless it violates the performance standards, the safety standards.
what's the safety difference just between
We're talking about the height.
my fence
Randy's
being 12
asking.
feet tall?
Right.
You may think this is funny, but the reality is what you're opening is Pandora's box. And what you're going to do is
Just
you're
a
going to
minute.
have
Okay, come on,
the
guys.
unintended consequences of people.
Through the chair. Address
I-
the comments to me, Randy.
I am.
Nobody thinks it's funny.
What I'm saying is the unintended consequences of what you're doing is allowing anyone to put these hedges anywhere on their property with no guidelines other than unless someone from the city comes and says, we don't think that that's appropriate or that's not right. Or I guess to me, the bottom line is safety. So that's what we're
Safety,
doing.
visibility, and encroaching on the public right of way.
And
Amendment,
so what
Randy,
I'm saying is
amendment.
if the city official goes in and makes this statement to an individual community member, that person now can come back to council and appeal our internal decision. Am I correct?
Okay,
No,
Randy,
you're wrong.
Souza. Okay, I'm going to have to assert
cannot
myself
appeal.
now. So much nice guys. Stop. Okay, Randy, do you have an amendment you'd like to propose so we can move the discussion to the subject? I agree with you. I have a concern that people would say, hey, I can't put a fence up my front yard, but I can put up a 15-foot hedge all around my property and become Montecito. Isn't that one of the issues?
That's my biggest issue. The fact
Okay,
that,
so does anybody have a proposal to address that?
so my amendment would be if we have a 6-foot requirement for all other types of fences and hedges, that we institute that in the front yard also. And that if someone needs to increase it or have something larger, let them come in, demonstrate through a minor variance that they need it, and let's move on. But I think an unlimited height is not good for this community.
Okay.
Is there a second to that? I'll second it. Okay. Susie, you have a comment.
If someone does that, it would most likely be to mitigate the noise, like on Grand Avenue of traffic. I just don't see people doing things like that.
I see
And,
it all the time.
it could be beautiful. You know, people have a right, to me, for privacy, because the character, there's so much traffic on some of the streets. Most of the time, that's what it would be for, to mitigate the noise of traffic. I don't see a problem allowing something.
Okay,
yes,
other comments on the proposed amendment? Ryan?
I don't disagree with you, Randy. I don't like the idea of we're going. We all, we're all worried about this thing happening in Ojai, but I've never seen it happen a lot.
Yeah.
And the hard part here is we are trying, and the first time this was ever discussed when I was on the council, the hard part was, there's Golden West, there's Persimmon Hill, there's the downtown square, I call it. There's the neighborhoods are so different. We're trying this one size fits all. This is why HOAs exist. This is why you move into a neighborhood and there's specific rules for that neighborhood. The houses in the downtown area used to be like, my place is an old barn. I can spin the camera around. It looks like an old barn. Like it's got more space in the front than in the back. All of these places are so unique and weird.
Yeah.
The one thing I'll say is that if you want to do something to try and make some of these properties work, what we're really indicating in this is hedges are much preferred, and we're much more flexible on that. Hedges have some visibility generally through them anyway, even though they're not generally opaque in a pure sense during the day. There's a lot of benefits. They're living. They do encroach, but you got to get people out to trim them. I'm with you. I don't think they need to be over 6 feet high ever, but I also think the code clearly indicates that that's not allowed. Now, if we need to put a maximum height in because you feel that's a real problem, I would support that. But this is the hard part is I can think of 3 houses in Del Oro where it's a problem, and 2 houses in my block that's different, and 2 houses in Persimmon Hill that are different. It's really difficult. What I will say is I like hedges, and as far as aesthetically in a community, and especially an environmentally sound community like ours, a lot more than I like walls and a lot more than I like fences. And if we add a little bit of flexibility there, I think we're actually incentivizing people to maybe go that direction, which I think is positive. Plus, the upkeep is more expensive long term. But I'm okay with a height limit, but I do like the idea that this promotes hedges in kind of an indirect way, and I think we would all. I believe we're all in a consensus that we'd like to see more hedges than walls and fences.
Yeah.
All I'm saying in response to this is, and this is where I started my discussion completely from day one on this, is being able to back out of your driveway and not run someone over that's on a sidewalk because you have a 6 foot or 10 foot or 12 foot or 20 foot hedge blocking your line of sight. And that has been dropped from consideration.
No, it hasn't.
But yes, it has, because of the fact that now we're saying hedges are different.
No.
And therefore we're going to allow them to be whatever we want them to be. So I am sorry. I'm not going to support this one iota because of the fact.
We haven't vote. Didn't you make an amendment?
Right.
And I seconded it. You're not going to support that, or I'm not sure where you are, Randy. Just a second, sis. I'll get to you.
No, if they're going to accept my amendment of 6 foot maximum in the front yard, I would appreciate that, but I don't have a sense I'm going to get that. So.
Okay. Well, now the amendment of the second order would be to discuss what the height would be. There's a difference between 6 foot is still going to block people backing out of their driveways. So
I agree.
Okay, so the sight thing still is in play, regardless if it's a fence or a hedge.
Yes.
Now the question is how high is high, and are you going to put it into this thing? We have some hedges down on Grand Avenue that look to me like they're starting to push 12 feet.
How about 20? They're trees. They're not hedges.
Well, yeah, it is. People can raise them as trees. It's just the way they pruned it. Okay, Ryan, do you have a amendment?
Yeah, I was just going to say real quickly on the driveway situation, Randy, I do agree. There's no carve out in this for a safety triangle for driveways. I don't think we need to add one personally, but it didn't account for it anyway. The other thing I wanted to say was the issue about driveways. One thing I'll say is it's mandatory on new cars, so it's coming in. It's not all there yet, but people don't look backward when they pull out anymore. They look at their video camera in the video in the front. That's mandatory on new. That's a safety feature that's mandatory on new cars. It's been like that for a number of years. So we are moving in a direction. Remember, the safety backing out visibility makes no difference if you're looking at the camera on your dashboard.
Well, your camera, yeah, you're right. They do have a wide angle, but if there's a hedge there,
Right, but people aren't looking backwards. I mean, people literally don't lean. They don't put their shoulder over if you have the camera in front when
okay,
they
well,
back up.
the amendment is for 6 feet. Should we vote on that and see whether that's going any place? Okay, if there's no objection to do we need to? I don't know if we need to call the roll on each one of these or not. Money issues.
Voice vote.
I think we should vote
I'm
on the
good with
amendment.
6 feet. For what it's worth, I'm good with 6 feet.
Do you want to, Matt?
A voice vote would be fine. And just to clarify, what this would be is, as I understand, it would be an amendment to add a line, a 6 stipulation for hedges, that a hedge could not be maintained above 6 feet in height in the front setback unless approved to be taller by the director through a minor CUP.
Thank you.
That would be the addition.
Matt, along with the other amendments you recommended before.
Yeah,
Right.
that was in the main motion. So this is just this added 6 foot height limit for hedges in the front setback.
Okay.
So that would be appropriate for a vote, which
we
could be.
need a roll call.
But I don't
Just a
understand.
second, just a second, Matt. Do we need a roll call?
No, voice vote's fine.
No. Okay, so a voice vote. All those in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Motion has got two ayes. Those
This
against?
is the 6 foot amendment, correct? I want to make
Yeah.
right. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, you
We
should
have-
ask who's against, Johnny, before you just decide.
Do what?
Ask who's against, then you'll know who's, because people could abstain or not vote against it. So you got to ask who's against it.
Right, yeah.
Okay, I'm a no.
I'm a no.
I'm a no.
Okay.
I think that once you get to 6 feet, 8 feet, okay, so we're back to the original motion. Is there any more amendments to the motion? If not, okay, let's take a roll call on the proposed ordinance. All those in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Aye, okay. Negative, no? Okay, 4-1. The thing gets, now that's what, first reading? Is that where we are?
Yes.
Okay,
Mayor,
so there's another bite of it, Randy. We'll talk some more.
Mayor Johnston, for the record, I am not clear on who the no vote was.
Randy,
Randy.
Okay, thank you.
okay. So what do we have left on this, James? Are we done?
Did that include, the city attorney could tell me if that included the rescinding the suspension of enforcement?
Yes, that was baked into the proposed ordinance.
But
Okay.
that would be effective after approval of the second reading.
Correct.
Yeah.
It takes effect if and when the ordinance takes effect after second reading, then
Good.
suspension of enforcement would be lifted.
30 days after, if it passes second reading.
No,
Correct. And for what it's worth, staff is acutely aware of the situation that happened the last time that arose.
Yep.
And is very acutely aware of the need for enforcement to be sensible.
Sensitive.
Sensitive.
Matt, my dad got the letter from the district attorney. I'm sure we're all very aware of how the hedge situation went.
Sensitive.
Yeah.
Okay.
We,
well, you know, but Randy brings up a good point, and and we got
Totally agree.
yeah. So, okay.
I have a question. Matt, does that,
I agree with you.
does that include the reduction of the fee? Are we
Yes.
all good with that? Okay.
50.
actually, that one might need its own vote. The $50 fee. Let me double check how we phrase the
I
agenda.
thought that was
What
included
was
in
it?
the,
What was it? Wasn't that how it was originally passed, Matt?
it was originally 100 in the first reading
Oh,
introduction
okay.
motion. It is 50 stipulated in the first reading ordinance that we just passed.
Yeah, no, so that includes the 50 as well.
Right.
Okay, so this comes back before the council when? In 2 weeks?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, and then it's 30 days following that. So,
Yeah.
or
And I don't know if it's 2 weeks. Mayor, I don't know if it's 2 weeks till our next meeting because the staff would know if it's
Next meeting.
okay, well, whenever the next regular meeting.
next
Okay.
regular meeting.
Okay,
Next
so, yeah. One question, and the topic is over, but in the case of the Planning Commission, did anybody discuss this? What concerns me is that if we go for a height limitation, or no limitation at all. You know, it's sort of like it blocks the property out entirely. And didn't we spend, when I first got on the council, I listened to about an hour and a half worth of consulting reports on neighborhood design?
Yes, the Sargent Town planning people did that.
A certain portion of that was to be able to see the front of a house and to be
Yes.
more inviting.
But it was also very neighborhood based.
What Randy's brought up is a dilemma as to if people decide they want to have an encampment or an enclosure.
Again,
So anyway,
that's why the language is in there, Johnny, about by council resolution, so we can make course adjustments easily.
And Mr. Mayor, if I recall, that had a lot to do with how complicated it was trying to make these rules with various neighborhoods that were so different and different ages and different histories. And I mean, how often do we hear from the Arbolata that there's, a right-of-way infringement or rocks or hedges or other problems, and it's different in the box downtown and Persimmon Hill, et cetera. So that's the really difficult part. We may have a very small town, but as far as neighborhood diversity, we have very unique areas, and you get behind bonds, and it's just a whole. Then you're in a, almost like a more modern tract house area.
But that's why this flexibility is in here by council resolution that allows for adjusting.
Okay, well, hopefully Austin is out there and he writes a story on this so that we have more than one comment from the public at the public hearing, because I got the feeling that we're going to have a whole lot of comments once it goes into effect.
Well, I had a lot after the last time.
Yeah.
Okay.
We considered the comments from the public in our changes. So
All of them. I'd like to see them. So just one final thought on this. Let's just, I think we need to be clear that the downtown community should not drive the city of Ojai.
That's right. That's right.
what's that mean?
Is that the one little enclave, Randy, that lives on Ventura and Aliso
Randy,
area?
I'm going to say the unincorporated area shouldn't drive the city of Ojai. So,
No, the unincorporated area is
okay, well,
in the city of
everybody by
Ojai.
now, if they tuned in, knows the topic's out there, so they can't say someone didn't talk about it. And the next meeting, let's see whether or not there's that much concern. I don't have a good answer for it. Okay, let's go to the next topic, which is the Reach Amendment. Is that right? Yes.
Mayor, I just want to say, I don't know if we have any public comment, but I don't know if we hit public comment at all.
Yeah, we
Oh,
did.
you're right. You're right. We got so happily chatting
I
amongst
think that was
ourselves.
our one issue so far.
Yeah. Okay. That's good.
We got public comment on the issues, Susan, but not public comment.
Okay.
Right. Got you. Gail, do we have anybody in the queue on public comment? Because I went way over.
We did have one person. Let me see if that person is still here.
Oh, it's 8 o'clock. Woo.
I apologize to whoever that one person is. I didn't. We got carried away there.
No, that person is no longer showing in the waiting room.
Did he leave what his comment was?
No, our system is not set up for them to leave comments in the sign-up software. However, it was Jack Weber.
I think he's back.
Pardon? Oh.
Michael Chicos?
No, I'm talking about the people who signed up for general public communications, and it was a man named Jack Weber, and he did provide public comment on agenda item 3 that he supports the REACH codes. So that might have been what he was.
Okay, so it was.
here for.
So he was not. Maybe he'll come back, but.
Yeah.
Okay, so we don't have any general comments from the public or communications on topics not on the agenda. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, fine. In future, there's not much future left for me, but I would suggest that if a member of the staff want to interrupt and say that, set an alarm or something so we don't miss the 7:30 appointed time. So, okay, let's go to the REACH amendment. I'm the one who got us sort of into this, and my purpose was to the climate committee has done a lot of work, and that while it is a difficult subject in some cases, it needs to start being talked about in public and not in ad hoc committees or off the record. So we end up with a little bit of I won't say confusion, but I want to thank James and Matt for their effort of trying to blend what I said last time and what Bill Wyrick said, the motion that was made. And they tried to interpret that as to what kinds of changes would be made in what was proposed by the climate committee. So my suggestion is that we kind of consider the climate committees. First, let's have a presentation from the climate committee, because this is a committee report as opposed to a staff report. And then after we've heard that, let's ask our questions and decide what changes, if any, that the council wants to suggest between now and when this gets brought back, for more formal action. So, Michelle, you're out there. Are you the kickoff or the representative for the committee?
Hi there. I'm here, right here.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Well, good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm Michelle Ellison, Chair of the Climate Emergency Mobilization Committee. I'm joined by my fellow committee members, Steve Calamay, Bill White, Jim Selman, and Brian Hawley. We've also invited Amy Ryder of the Building Decarbonization Coalition to join us again to answer any questions that might arise. We appreciate your thoughtful consideration of an all-electric REACH code for new buildings in Ojai. And as a reminder, the proposed REACH code has no effect on existing buildings. I'll take no more than the next 5 minutes to present our committee's summary and recommendations. As we've discussed previously, the key benefits to building all electric are as follows. First, cost savings. All electric new buildings cost less to build since there's no natural gas infrastructure. Modern, efficient electric appliances use significantly less energy to operate, so utility costs are lower. Further, the cost difference will only grow in the future as gas is phased out as an energy source. Lower building costs and lower operating costs improve housing affordability. An important reminder, REACH codes are legally required to demonstrate cost effectiveness. The cost effectiveness study that confirms these findings is included in your agenda packet. Number 2, reduced indoor air pollution. Natural gas cooking increases indoor air pollution, which disproportionately impacts low-income households. Occupants of residents with natural gas cooking have increased risk of developing asthma and other respiratory diseases. Electric ovens and induction cooktops eliminate indoor combustion-related emissions. And as an aside, many of the world's top chefs are induction cooking enthusiasts. Number 3, reduced outdoor air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions. Natural gas combustion from buildings is a major source of ozone and ultrafine particulate outdoor air pollution. This matters everywhere, but especially in the Ojai Valley, which has the second worst air quality in the county. Natural gas is also a significant source of carbon dioxide and methane greenhouse gas emissions driving climate change. All electric buildings eliminate these emissions. In Ojai, gas from buildings is the second largest source of emissions behind pollution. So this is an important first step to begin weaning ourselves off gas. Number 4, improved safety and resiliency. During earthquakes, fires have been started by natural gas leaks from broken pipes. All electric building construction reduces this risk while also being faster to repair and bring services online after an outage. Pipelines explode like the catastrophe in San Bruno, which killed 8 people, and there are environmental disasters like the massive leak at Aliso Canyon. Following the council meeting 2 weeks ago, the Climate Committee prepared and refined a draft ordinance for an all-electric REACH code for new buildings, which is attachment B of your packet. We recommend using this version since it's been cleaned up, it's more straightforward, and will be easier to implement. Furthermore, we recommend that the ordinance not memorialize additional proposed exceptions. We understand the concern about unintended consequences, so should issues arise that weren't anticipated, or if an applicant can provide a compelling reason and a defendable rationale for an exemption, we believe an appeals process is the better way of handling it rather than blanket exemptions which dilute the impact of the ordinance. You can rest assured Ojai is not alone, charting some unknown or untested territory here. 35 other cities across the state have also done their due diligence, researching building reach codes, and all came to the conclusion that electrifying is the right thing to do. This reach code opportunity was brought to the council's attention over a year ago. Each passing day of inaction means more climate disaster, so it's in our collective best interest to not draw the process out further. As such, please take decisive action to close out this legislative term and further solidify Ojai as an exemplary climate leader. We ask that council tonight adopt the first reading of the all-electric reach code ordinance as proposed by the Climate Committee in Attachment B. Thank you.
Johnny, I have a question for Michelle.
Bill.
Yeah, Michelle, I'm trying to drill down on this statement about 35 cities adopting reach codes. You sent me the link to that?
Yes.
I actually went through the list and looked at the codes of a number of them. And it looked to me like the kind of recommendation that the Climate Emergency Committee is making to Ojai is really only consistent with about 3 of those 35 as currently adopted. I did a rough count, and about 20 of the 35 have exceptions for certain building types and uses, and about 12 adopt a preferred or incentive approach with the blanket as presented here. I could only find 3. That may not be correct, but I wonder, your reaction to what my personal inspection led to in terms of, 35 cities have adopted reach codes, but there's a wide range of diversity in what's been adopted.
Before Michelle answers, can I ask you this, Bill? Just what are the 3? Because I think it's Carlsbad, Berkeley, and I didn't know what the third was, and I want to make sure.
Actually, some of those weren't on that list of 35.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah.
So in response to your question, yes, of the 35, a majority have adopted an all-electric approach. There is an electric preferred, which incentivizes electric over gas, but that's not as ambitious in terms of emission reduction or cost effectiveness as the all-electric approach. So that's
what I'm just trying to drill down to being accurate here is the vast majority either have carve-outs or exceptions for certain building uses or building classifications and are a preferred incentive approach. I saw a very small minority is what you're proposing to us.
I'm proposing that we be as ambitious as possible and I'll lead by example.
Okay. Thank you.
The way to, to try to handle this is sort of like a joint meeting with our climate committee to give them the opportunity both to express themselves and to give the council the opportunity to ask the key questions, or as Bill would say, to drill down. Steve Colney, would you like to add anything to what Michelle has, or you want to hold off and just take questions?
I'll unmute. I mean, I think at this point, I will hold off. What the climate committee did in setting our priorities for presenting to the council was to list the priorities of those actions that were climate pollutant mitigation strategies. That is reducing climate producing gases. That's carbon dioxide primarily and methane. And to identify the things that the city had the jurisdiction to tackle and to tackle those aggressively, recognizing that really we are and must be on a glide path to eliminating our use of fossil fuels. And that's going to include our liquid fuels as well as gaseous fuel. And if we're going to meet the state standard, we have to be on that glide path to get there no later than 2050. We certainly want to be there faster. So this is a dramatic shift in activities. Some of these issues will be forced upon the city if we don't act ourselves. So this is just a small first step, and it's so much cleaner than trying to anticipate carve-outs in our minds.
Okay. Phil, did you want to add anything at this point?
Yeah, Johnny. Well, from my perspective, I think that the best way to go is to keep it simple. I mean, Bill's right that there's a range of approaches that have been taken around the state where, call it carve outs, where certain things were exempted from all electric. And we believe that it's cleaner to stay simple, get an all electric ordinance code adopted with an appeals process that allows people who have a case to make for their particular gizmo that just got to have natural gas, and to have that appeals process be incorporated in the city staff and probably appealable to the council, because these kind of decisions are policy decisions that ought to be made by elected officials. But my opinion is keeping it simple, all electric, with no carve outs, other than we did come up with one ADUs within the footprint of an existing house would not be considered new construction falling into all electric, because they might share a natural gas heater, for example. So I think that's the best way to go. I mean, you could sit here all night long and argue about all the different kinds of gas appliances and whether you want to include them. I think what you need is a process for evaluating those over time.
Thanks, Phil. Now I see Brian Holly's name on the screen, but is Brian with us?
I'm with you. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, Michelle had a really good introduction, and Steve, of course, followed up with important items. Phil, I think, hit one of the most important points from my perspective, which is instead of getting, sort of caught up in the actual specifics, our committee has been charged with what is an emergency. And I think we need to look at this, what we've been doing over the past several months as truly addressing what we as a committee believe, and I think the city does as well, to deal with this emergency. And so sometimes you have to make, actions that might be a little bit more drastic than you originally anticipate or even want to do in a public setting. But at the same time, I think from my perspective, it doesn't matter if we're one of three cities that have adopted this kind of thing. I think we need to be a front runner, and I think we need to take some action, even if that creates a little bit of blowback down the line and we have to correct our actions. It's better to step forward with, a strong idea than it is to sit on the sidelines and debate relatively small issues.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Is Jim with you? I don't see his name up, so I guess the four that have spoken from the committee, Michelle, is that all of the?
Yes, Jim wasn't sure whether or not he was going to be able to participate in the entire meeting, so he might join at some point.
Okay, should we take public communications and get some feel for the blowback, or the support, whichever it is? Gail, do you have a list of people who would like to comment or who have sent something in?
Yes, the first public speaker we have who signed up is Jonathan Ullman.
Okay, Jonathan, you're on the air?
Yes. Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, great. Hi, first of all, thank you very much for having this hearing. My name is Jonathan Ullman. I'm the director of the Los Padres chapter of the Sierra Club, which represents Ventura and Santa Barbara counties. If this REACH code ordinance is passed, Ojai would become the first city in Ventura County to pass a new building electric REACH code. Ojai would join Santa Monica, San Luis Obispo, San Jose, and 32 other California municipalities in closing the door to fossil fuels in new construction. As Michelle mentioned, there are 3 major benefits to this. The first is health. Indoor gas releases carcinogens like nitrogen oxide, carbon monoxide, nitric oxide, and formaldehyde into your lungs when you're using gas stovetops. A recent study by UCLA School of Public Health found that when stove and oven are used simultaneously for an hour, acute exposure to nitrous oxide exceeds national and California-based ambient air quality thresholds more than 90% of the time. So you're protecting the health of people who are living in new buildings in Ojai. That's important. The second is climate. As we've mentioned, fracked gas is contributing greatly to climate change. It's a major contributor to the record-breaking heat we're feeling each year, and it's largely because of methane, which is one of the most powerful greenhouse gases. The last is cost. Building all electric buildings cuts cost. A recent analysis by the statewide utility codes and standards team found that building all electric reduced construction costs on average $5,000 for single family homes and over $2,000 per unit in a multifamily building. Let me just say this. We support the Climate Committee's REACH Code ordinance. It's strong. It's something that you would expect from Ojai, which has always been a leader. And Ojai is going to break the mold. SoCal Gas obviously does not want this, but you have an opportunity here to say, we are going to be the first city in Ventura. And because of your leadership, there may be other cities throughout Ventura who see your leadership and adopt similar REACH codes. So I strongly support it. Our organization has sent in a letter to you, and we urge you to pass this REACH code today. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Jonathan. Gail, who's next?
Okay, the next person is Christopher Wallen.
Okay. Christopher, are you out there?
Good evening. Can you guys hear me?
Yes. Welcome.
Whoops.
Can you hear us? Christopher?
That's me.
Mute? Are you on mute, Bill Wyrick? Make sure you are.
Okay, Christopher, go ahead.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, City Council. Nice to see you all. Quick update, the Dodgers are 1 inning away from winning it all. So just keep that in the back of your mind. Okay, I've got screen sharing. Thank you all. As you know, I've been in Ojai as a solar industry stakeholder and also joined the City Council Solar Task Force last year on working on cementing Ojai's role as sort of fast-tracking resiliency measures such as renewable energy for public buildings such as fire station, city council, the hospital, Nordoff, which as we know is a Red Cross evacuation site. You've heard me say this before. In my mind, it's about resiliency as the community of Ojai is concerned. And a resilient community will survive longer than a non-resilient community. And what we've seen here in the start of 2020 is that all new construction is required solar energy on rooftops. And we've seen all stakeholders in the industry embrace this new ordinance. Architects are designing solar into the design plans from the beginning. They're putting all of the mechanicals and the venting on the north side, leaving the south side and the west side primed for solar. builders and realtors are all rallying behind the solar construction ordinance. And this is incentivizing homeowners to not only have solar, but to embrace the electrification of homes. And it comes down to a resilient community, and the more rooftop solar and the more battery backup that we can have in our community, the safer our community is. And I think that really, really underscores what we are here to do to fast track these resilient measures. And, you know, it's been a couple years and we go back to the Thomas Fire. What have we done? So I want to remind us, this is an opportunity to really rally behind the electrification of homes. So I strongly support the REACH code ordinance that the Climate Committee is proposing. Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher. Gail, next in line.
Okay, the next person is Maria Ventura.
Okay. Maria, are you out there? Can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. Good evening, council members, mayor, city staff, and Ojai residents. My name is Maria Ventura. I'm the public affairs manager representing SoCal Gas throughout Ventura County, and I appreciate these moments to say a few comments. Like you, SoCal Gas is committed to reducing emissions from the building sector. I am commenting today to request that we be included in future policymaking impacting energy source availability for buildings. As one of the largest energy providers in the region, we understand that we have a vital role to play in partnering with cities and state agencies to achieve our shared decarbonization goals. That's why our company's leadership team committed last year to becoming the cleanest gas distribution utility in North America. We're doing so in part by replacing 20% of our gas supplies with renewable natural gas by 2030, and by offering advanced technologies to customers that better meet their energy reliability needs. This includes enhancing our energy conservation and efficiency offerings, offering cleaner sources of energy like renewable natural gas and hydrogen, and deploying fuel cells and microgrids to maintain reliability for entire neighborhoods during extreme weather events and disasters. As you develop and implement future energy and climate change policy, we ask you to consider the important role that gas technologies, including hydrogen and renewable natural gas, and our distribution system play in maintaining resiliency and reliability. Our gas distribution system is inherently resilient to climate change impacts because it's entirely underground. When disasters occurs, residents are able to cook food, take warm showers, and boil water because of the gas system. We've seen what can occur when we rely too heavily on one energy system. During the Thomas Fire, firefighters couldn't access water because pumps only ran electricity with no backup. Further, recent studies have found that multiple redundant energy systems are needed to help ensure reliable energy for city residents and businesses. The city does not need to sacrifice reliability and resiliency to achieve its climate goals. We hope to work within your staff to share information about alternative energy resources so you are better aware of all the energy options available to you and can make better informed decisions about the technologies you want your residents to have access to. We believe the city's upcoming general plan update is a great opportunity to explore these options. We look forward to collaborating with you to make Ojai a model for how other cities can address climate change and resiliency. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Gail, who is next?
Next is Michael Chiagos.
Michael, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can. Welcome.
Well, good evening. Thank you for the hearing today. My name is Michael Chiagos. I'm the Director of Energy and Climate Programs at the Community Environmental Council. And you heard my comments last time, so I'll make them a little shorter this time. CEC strongly supports an all-electric REACH code. We support the version that the Climate Committee has put forward. We need to, in California, be building new buildings that use clean electricity, not natural gas, not fracked natural gas. These buildings are cheaper to build, as you've heard. They're healthier to operate. And also, California has a carbon neutrality goal of 2045. So we can't continue digging us deeper into the climate crisis hole by hooking up new natural gas lines. We realize that there's not a lot of building going on in Ojai, but that this is a unique opportunity to influence state policy as many jurisdictions, 35 jurisdictions around the state have already adopted these REACH codes. And the state of California is looking at REACH codes statewide. This will also influence other jurisdictions. You've heard that the county of Ventura has electrification REACH code in their recently adopted climate action plan. And also large cities like Oxnard, Thousand Oaks, Ventura are all doing climate action plans right now. So this is a unique opportunity to influence other cities in Ventura County as well as the state. I want to note on the comments about renewable natural gas. We do support renewable natural gas. We should definitely capture that from landfills and dairies, but it's just a very tiny percent of the amount of natural gas that we use in the California system. In fact, in order to hit that 20% goal that SoCalGas has, they would need to bring in huge amounts of renewable natural gas from other states because there's just not that much coming from landfills and dairies. It's a very limited supply. So renewable natural gas is really not a long-term solution, and we need to electrify our buildings. Thank you so much for considering this. I hope you'll move forward with an all-electric REACH code.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. Gail, next in line.
Next, we have Michael Shapiro.
Michael, can you hear us? Michael, can you hear us?
Oh,
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, council members, city attorney, city manager. I really think this is a no-brainer and a great addition to Ojai's leadership throughout the county for quite a long time now. I know right now the 5-pound limit is safe again, but as we all know on the council, it wasn't that long ago that it was threatened once again. And if Ojai is going to have the 5-pound limit and oppose fracking as we do, and a lot of climate change contributions as we do, we're leadership. We have to take the leadership in this particular issue too. This is where it's all going to go. We may be the first, but everyone will follow for sure, because it's just a matter of time. Global climate change is a fact, even though there are a few naysayers still out there, some even in our city who have a voice, but that's far and few between. We have to adopt this. There's no question about it. And to be a leader in this is something we've already been, and we should continue, and this is one way to do that. One of the things I'd request, and I was really quite, I knew a lot about the effects of the internal environments in the home from the home that uses gas. But when you hear the laundry lists as expressed by Michelle and one other gentleman, it's really shocking what's going on within our homes, those of us who have gas-powered homes. And I wonder if the Climate Change Committee could make that list of dangers, potential dangers from an old gas fueled home, both heat and all the appliances as well, to the public. If there's some way to get that, maybe it could be printed online at the city and we could download that. I think that would be very valuable. And I had no idea that laundry list was that long and the dangers were so large. And I think if that was publicized more widely, the buy-in from the public would be very, very significant. So all in all, this is a win-win situation. It's an opportunity for Ojai to continue its leadership role in the environment. It cements our 5-pound limit for a long time to come, because no one could say Ojai is hypocritical. They had a chance to do something like this and they didn't. No, we lead and we mean what we say, and we're gonna follow suit. So those are my comments for this evening, and I hope you pass this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Gail, next.
We have one more. I have one more person listed named John Brooks, but there's no John Brooks in the waiting room. However, there's a phone number showing, and it doesn't have a name next to it.
Okay.
So I'll go ahead and allow that person in. Hello,
John?
Go ahead.
Is this John Brooks? Hello. Is there anyone out there by any name?
Hello. Yes, I had to switch to phone from the Zoom thing because I was losing connectivity. So this is John Brooks, and hi, everybody.
Yeah, John Brooks, KFWB.
Well, formerly.
Yeah, formerly.
Tonight, Mayor Johnson and council members, as you know, I am John Brooks. Right now, I'm president of Climate First, replacing oil and gas. And I'm trying to speak tonight on behalf of our many members in Ventura County, but especially those who live and work and play in the city of Ojai and the upper Ojai valleys, one of whom, Michael, you just heard from. We've known for months that California must go electric for both environmental and cost-saving reasons, but really, I was ignorant of some of the best ways to reach those goals until I read your climate committee's all-electric reach code. You know, I was not a reach code expert coming into this. CFROG is encouraging you to adopt the climate committee's all-electric reach code for the new buildings and pass it right now, tonight. The straightforward approach in the climate committee code provides lower building costs due to needing only a single utility meter and infrastructure. It's less expensive to operate over time, especially as gas is phased out and the fixed costs of the delivery system are borne by a decreasing number of customers. New all-electric homes are the best solution. I would love one. And as the city increases affordable housing, it's less expensive to build those, less expensive to operate, and it improves, as you heard, indoor air quality, especially in those smaller units. Now, the fact that you guys have a first-class climate committee shows that Ojai has been a leader. CFROG marvels at your leadership and encourages you to continue on the path. Take the committee's advice. CFROG encourages the council to adopt the climate committee's all-electric reach code for new buildings and pass it tonight. Thank you very much. Johnny, you and I go back some 40 years probably dealing with each other. I'll miss you for one. And go Dodgers. It's 3-1 and 1 out in the ninth.
Okay, thank you, John. Okay, Gail, do we have anyone else?
There are no more speakers, live speakers. We had 30 public comments on this sent in on emails. 28 were in favor of reach codes and 2 opposed.
Okay, well, we'll take it back to the council and council members, questions for the members of our climate committee as to Bill's got his hand up.
Yeah. This is a detail question. And of course, you know, details are important when we're crafting these things. I noticed in the attachment B, page 5 of 8, that the water heating system was stipulated, and it appears to be stipulated. Some of the appendixes are missing, so I can't look them up. That the water heating system was either compact or single heat pump water heater. In other words, it appears to not allow just a straight up small electric hot water heater. Am I reading that correct in terms of this recommendation or not? Then I have one more question after that real quick.
Yeah. Can anybody answer that from the committee? I'm not, Phil.
Which version are you looking at?
I would answer that. And I think in terms of water heating, that the logical choices would be heat pump water heater and or solar. We have a solar water heater on our house with electric backup. And if you've looked around the state, you'll see that a lot of jurisdictions have those 2 options.
But not just a straight up small, like for a small ADU, a straight up a heating element water heater.
No, because they're very inefficient relative to a heat pump water heater or a solar water heater. They don't really make sense.
And the second question, really quick.
Bill, before you get off that, Bill, is there something in what's being proposed that is it just silent on the electric water heater that Bill's referring to, or did you guys consider that? Or is there a prohibition against it? Does that meet the standards under what we're talking about?
Well, it says shall meet, and it doesn't list that.
I don't have, Johnny, I don't have it in front of me. If it's not clear, I would suggest that as you adopt this, that be clarified in the motion. Those are the 2 logical options: heat pump water heater or solar.
Right.
Attachment B should be 6 pages. So if you're looking, if it's 8, I think you said 8, Councilmember Wyrick, that was
I was just looking at the page 5 of 8 at the bottom right of the page on attachment B.
But you should have, it should be a 6-page version if you're looking.
I'm not disputing that.
Okay, got it. Okay.
I just was
making sure there was a prior version of attachment B. I want to make sure.
And Mayor, I'll wait my turn for another question.
Okay, so there's nothing that prohibits using it, but you're saying that there are really 2 good alternatives, Phil. That's right, solar and heat pump, because they're more efficient or more effective. And why wouldn't somebody put a more efficient, effective?
If I could speak to that.
To clarify that, those are the 2 efficient options.
Equivalent capacity heat pump water heaters, about 5 times the cost of a straight electric hot water heater. They're much more efficient, but about 5 times the expense.
Right. Okay, but if they're not prohibited, if they're just silent on it, but we could clarify that. Okay. Other questions for the committee?
Well, I'll ask another one if no one else has one.
Yeah, we are also in the gallery here. We've got Tom from Building and Safety, and also Amy from the Reach Code presentation. So you have other resources to ask questions of. Go ahead, Bill.
Just a real quick question. Given that there's a wide range of the different adopted Reach codes, in fact, the 2 mentioned nearest to us, Santa Monica and San Luis Obispo, they're not what's being recommended to us. They have flexibility that's not in this one. Since there's such a wide range, I was wondering if Tom knew of any possible litigation that's been provoked by these wide ranges of different types of Reach codes. Is something to be aware of, in other words?
I'm not aware of any litigation.
Okay.
But again, everything falls back to the basic building code. Everything still would have to meet the energy standards and the basic building code to be approved by my department.
Okay. Just curious, given the wide range of diversity of different specifics.
Susan,
may I suggest that we ask Amy Ryder to riff on this a little bit, on the different Reach codes around the state and why it makes sense to have an all-electric Reach code here.
Okay, sure. Is that all right, Susan? Okay, we'll go to Amy. Amy, would you like to chime in here?
Yeah, I was just actually going through the text to look for the comment about the electric water heaters. I'm still curious about that one, Councilmember Wyrick, because I don't think it calls it out one way or another, but it does have to meet the efficiency standards of the code one way or another. So I don't think it's exclusively prohibited, but it still has to be an efficient enough unit in order to qualify under Title 24's energy code. But setting that aside and addressing the litigation question, there is active litigation against the city of Berkeley's approach, which is a gas infrastructure moratorium, which is not at all what we're talking about here today. That's using police powers at the city scale to for public health and safety purposes. And there's a number of those that haven't had that. Actually, I think there are 6 moratoriums across the state, and only 1 has received litigation in that way.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, other questions or comments? Okay, well, I guess
I think Susan had a hand up.
Susan has her hand up.
Yeah, we did receive at least 30 letters in support, including from Sea Frog, you heard already from John Brooks, Sierra Club, the 350 Climate Hub, Extinction Rebellion. And we received several outstanding letters, and one was from 70 architects, a man representing 70 architects. And I wanted to read some excerpts from that letter that I think really applies to some of the issues that have come up. So may I do that for about
Sure.
2 minutes. This is from Scott Shell, so you have a copy of this if I don't read all of it. But it says, Dear Mayor and Council members, on behalf of the 70 architects and staff at EHDD Architecture, that's the name of the people that started it, initials, we are writing in support of your proposed all-electric reach code. We have been designing all-electric buildings around California for almost 20 years now and have found them robust, reliable, healthy, and cost-effective solutions for our clients. And as electric reach codes emerged 2 years ago, we met with our colleagues at other firms and our mechanical engineering partners and asked if the state of California was broadly ready to shift from gas to electric. The responses we got back were yes, with few exceptions. The design and construction industry is ready for this transition. There are many robust studies showing the cost effectiveness of building electrification. We have found that to be the case in our practice. A heat pump provides heating and cooling in one appliance, which is lower cost than having, two appliances, a gas furnace and electric air conditioner. This eliminates the gas service to the building, the meter gas piping inside the building, and flows through the roof.
Okay.
All reducing costs. Going to a single utility does not reduce resilience, since all modern gas appliances need electricity for electronic ignition and controls. They will not work in a power outage. And that's, there's more, but I'm running out of my voice. I wanted to ask about that because so many people have said to me that during a power outage, they can still light their stove with a match. So a couple of thoughts on that. You know, we don't, and first of all, you would definitely want to open up your windows if you do that. I'm not even sure if you can do that with the modern appliances, but you can. Is that right, Amy or Michelle?
It depends on the appliance. Some of them have safety features that disallow it, but generally that's true for a stove.
Yeah, I know that we discussed this, but that's something that I keep hearing. But also, I'm thinking if we're really in a true emergency, who wants to cook? You know, we can eat other things like for that, depending on the length of the emergency. That's my thought.
I don't know. Cup of hot tea on a cold night when there's no power.
Yeah, okay. Getting back to the whatever, you have some more excerpts you wanted to share with us?
Yeah. I'll skip about the health. There's a whole section on the health aspect. We've addressed that, but I want to read the last paragraph. We are especially concerned that continuing to build new fossil fuel infrastructure will then require expensive retrofits of relatively new buildings to meet California's legislated 2045 climate goals. This will saddle building owners with disruptive renovations in occupied buildings. Let's just build them right to start with. For the health, safety, climate benefits, and financial savings, we urge you to approve a strong all-electric ordinance. And it's signed by the 6 principals of the firm. But I was impressed that, you know, they've had 20 years of experience with all electric buildings.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Other questions of the folks we have here? Well, if not, I would like to propose a motion to support the what?
I have one question.
Okay, Randy.
Could someone from the climate committee explain the difference between new construction and existing construction? In your opinion, as to how this code reacts to it? So in other words, clarify, someone give me their definition of new construction.
Member of the committee, isn't that in one of the drafts?
Looks like Phil's trying to speak.
What?
I'll answer it. The intent is to.
No, not the intent. Not the intent. What's your definition?
The intent is to make this applicable to new construction, new buildings, and we don't consider remodels or modifications to buildings to be new buildings. Certainly, and I've heard that you're interested in making this stronger and applying it to remodels, and I don't think we disagree with that. But our proposal is to make it only for new buildings, and we think that's the best way to go. Get something on the books. Start implementing it, enforcing it. If you want to later expand it to include significant remodels, you certainly would have that option, but we're not recommending that at this time.
Well, just a second, let Randy still on the.
So I guess, Phil, when I look at when I keep hearing the word that it's cheaper to do all electric, one of the reasons that it's cheaper on the research that I've done is the fact that you're having to import a whole new gas line into the lot. If you look at cost of appliances, all electric appliances are a lot more expensive than gas appliances. So I see that there's some variables there in that cost that everyone keeps saying that an all electric construction is going to be less. That's why I wanted to clarify what the word new meant to you guys. Because if gas is already existing on the lot, that's why I looked at how can we, guys, we're talking 2 houses a year here, maybe 1.
No, they're also talking the accessory or the ADUs also.
I'm just trying to say is we're not, my perspective is if we're going to do something, let's do it. And it just seems like that what we're doing tonight is rather symbolic. I would prefer to send this back to the Climate Committee. And I'd prefer that the Climate Committee actually review all of the impacts that we would have in this community, cost-wise, if someone wanted to retrofit, or what it would cost someone that was actually doing something new, and then also actually doing an analysis on remodels and things of that nature. So I think there's a lot more work here that needs to be done. That's one part of it. The other part of it is, I don't think we've communicated this REACH code aspect to the community. We've not had a great dialogue, and there's so much gray out there, especially in the interpretation of it. And I just don't, we could push something through, and yeah, we got something on the books, but the reality is you're going to have to go back and amend it how many times and how many times and how many times. And
we do that anyway. We're like fences and hedges.
Yeah, you're going to tell me. But
they were working on that before I got on the council 4 years ago. And
that's why I think on the front end that there's more to do and more to achieve than just something symbolic. And I would say something else just regarding this community. Anything and everything that we do has to have a component of what makes this community great and how are we going to enhance what we have. And how are we going to move ourselves forward? And I know all of this does that, but there's also a component of it that makes it a little difficult and might be out of reach for some people. So I think that has to be addressed. If we're going to do this, there's the short term, which is the symbolic aspect, and there's the long term, which we know we're going to have to do, and that we all know that we want to do it sooner than later. So again, I'm just not sure if this is ready to be pushed through.
Okay, Ryan's got his hand up. Ryan, you're on.
Well, I wasn't sure if this was the right time to make my comments, but based on where everybody's at, I thought this is the right time now. I have 2, and I bear with me. I'm going to need a minute here, but I feel strongly about 2 issues that come to heads at this particular issue. One, I am staunchly in the camp that Ojai is a progressive environmental community that, as the Climate Committee, and I know Phil and Steve have said before, punches above its weight. I believe that it's important I have this philosophy that sometimes you move ahead of the world and the world moves towards you. We should take advantage of that. That's the situation we're in when it comes to progressive climate ideology and what we're willing to do. The hard part is that I have a conflicting issue that is even more important to me in Ojai. That is the overall creeping increase of cost of living. And this has a real sense to me of that being a problem. So I have reached out to a significant number of contractors who I know. And across the board, unanimously, they all said the same thing, that they don't believe it's cheaper, not necessarily on the installation end, but on the use end for long term. And I also read the 35 communities that have other ordinances that are out there, and I realized there's a lot of carve-outs. And one I saw frequently was about restaurants. So I reached out to some of the people I know who operate restaurants, and what they said was electric doesn't work because the speed they want to cook, the size of the kitchens, and some other issues. I don't have any problem, and frankly, in my discussions, significant discussions with the Climate Committee, have indicated that this is a symbolic gesture to some extent, especially because we don't have a lot of new construction. I would much rather see us putting this out as a recommendation with, even though it may not be supported by our committee, the carve-outs, because I think the carve-outs are important, and I would rather see us have a sunset clause of 6 months to come back and review this and get a sense of how this is working and what's working and how we might modify it and increase it to being mandatory in the same exact fashion that we did with gas-powered lawn equipment. We did not impose that on the whole city. We took it in our own. We did a case study. The reason why we changed opinion in the council and in the public was because I went to each one of our maintenance guys and said, how do you feel? What's going on? Well, let's put this out in the community and see. I don't mind a symbolic gesture of saying we're going to pass something, but at this point, I think the carve-outs are important. I am not in agreement at all with sending it to the BAB for appeals each time. One, we don't know what the BAB would do, and two, that's not really, we're putting it into the appeal process is not something I think is a good intent. I just don't think we're there yet. We're not Berkeley. We're not Carlsbad. I've been to both of those places a number of times. We don't have the wealth and exuberantly financially significant consistency in our community. They don't have the same issues we do. We have to me, we don't have a cost of living emergency community, but we should have had one 10 years ago. The school district knows very well how the cost of living is impeding their ability to have rear ends in the seats in the school district. So I think that restaurants, ADUs, and pools, including the rest of the ones that are on, and ADUs are already on there, I think they should all be exempted and carved out for now. We take a baby step, we dip our foot in the pool of how this is going to work, and we put a date certain where we come back and review it again. I don't think that makes it meaningless. I think it means that we're taking it seriously, but I am not willing at this point, without understanding the future of electric, the future of our community, and a lot of things that are going on here, that this could have significant negative consequences against. I don't want to see, for example, Suzanne's in downtown. If Suzanne's had to retrofit to non-gas, their kitchen is so small. I talked to some commercial kitchen individuals who said, look, it's not about that electric's not better. It's that the speed with which you can cook, the stuff you can get hot, when you're trying to turn over covers and make a business work, when you're a restaurant, electric doesn't suffice.
Okay.
So that's their opinion, but I'm not prepared to say that our community.
Okay, well, you're clear on that. I'm going to go ahead and make the motion, and I don't know that there's a second, but I am going to, my motion is that we approve the attachment be submitted by our climate committee and get this thing started. I don't see any damage to anybody in the town. It may have some bumps in the road going forward for new construction that we'll have to address, but everybody else, including Suzanne's, is not required to retrofit and to.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to finish because you cut me off.
No, I'm going to make a motion, and if there's no second, then you don't need to continue. I understand where you're coming from. You made it clear. Anyway, is there a second to my motion?
I did not finish what I had to say.
Is there a second to my motion?
I'll second your motion.
Okay, we have a second. Okay, Ryan, you're back to you.
All right, I just want to say that in some of these instances, I don't disagree, but I would rather have us have an initial approach of the carrot versus the stick. Jamming down everybody's throat where we don't know what the unintended consequences are, I don't agree with. I think there's a better way to do it where we can start to understand it by putting it out there. I also think that even by putting a lot of carve-outs in there, we can send the message, because most of the developments or building that would be required to deal with this under the new construction rule would have to go through the planning department or through community development, I should say. Community development. Community development can easily make it a recommendation to them that if they have to get approved by planning and the council and these other areas, that it's recommended that they do it. That is going to create an incentive in itself to have applicants who want to do it. I have a project I'm representing a client on who, again, I talked about this as soon as it came up. It's a commercial project that would be on Ojai Avenue. They said, look, if it will give us a better chance to get approved through the design review process, we're willing to go all electric. I would much rather see this as an incentivization rather than a jamming it down everybody's throat. And then with the carve outs, if people know that they have to get through approval, and that could be a significant improvement to their chances by being indicated that through the process, it's not mandatory, but I really believe they will do it unless they have a good reason, which would have to fit into one of the exclusions. And then down the road in only 6 months or whatever we would like, we can come back and look at it and say, okay, this is where we're at. Let's review this. But I am not prepared today to put a blanket rule over our community that could, again, do the one thing I really do have the strongest of all feelings against, which is the cost of living creep that seems to not be a concern with all of our with this council for the history of time, but has put us in a situation where I think it's causing some of the problems that we see in our community. And demographically, if you look at the stats, we're not healthy enough to just impose this kind of stuff.
Okay, Susan?
James or Matt, two things. First of all, I would like members of the Climate Committee time to respond to the issues that Ryan brought up. I would like to understand the appeals process better, how that works, because I'm not in favor of the carve-outs. I'm in favor of keeping this ordinance very clean, the way the Climate Committee recommends it. But I would like to understand the appeals process. Like, do they have to go to the BAB? I didn't know that.
No, they don't have to go to the BAB. We
Okay.
get to decide that, or the council will, the future council is a policy.
But that is what they recommended, Mr. Mayor. That is what they recommended.
Who did?
The Climate Committee has recommended that the appeal process would go to the BAB.
No, I don't think so, did they?
It's
Well,
what they-
I can't point to the words in here, but I've had multiple
No, they
meetings.
were
and
saying
they
you
told
could
me,
go-
so.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, it says appeal.
Matt, someone has his hand raised too.
Well, I'm going to answer Ryan. And
I'll let Matt answer the question
Okay.
of what's in there, and then we'll come to you, Bill.
I'll leave the policy debate to the council, of course. Looking at the two proposals before you, taking the Climate Committee proposal first, as that's the one in the motion. The Climate Committee proposal does not have an appeals process. It provides the decisions. Actually, I back up. I'm on the wrong version. It does have
page 7.
Yeah, section 7. I was looking at one up above. The Climate Committee's recommendation does have an appeals process. It provides that decisions are to be made by the Community Development Director, or as currently the manager, and then would be appealed straight to the City Council.
Right.
A bit of a departure from the typical code process for decisions of the manager being appealed to the Planning Commission and then to the Council. That's the proposal for the Climate Committee's process. That appeal would apply to any decision regarding the granting or denial of an exemption, including an infeasibility exemption under the proposed section 91/1006. The second appeals process that's proposed in the version, the other version, attachment A, would be the same exemptions process. There, it's a hardship or infeasibility, both. Exemption process, decisions to be made by the building official to be appealed to the Building Appeals Board, and that would be the end. That would not be appealable to council. So those are the two proposals from the two versions. as proposed, obviously.
But the version that's on the floor is the one that Susan was asking about, which is directly to the council as a policy matter, at least until such time as there is a criteria by which what hardship means. Admittedly, that is vague. Bill, you had your hand up.
I want to make some points. First of all, I really think it's unfortunate. I don't like going to everything that needs to be looked at, maybe from just a common sense standpoint, has to go through an appeal process. That is expensive in terms of time and money. And better to start out with some things that make sense in terms of what the vast majority of other REACH codes in the state have adopted, which are, I think it's worth studying how well thought out some of these are done. They're not all just, by any means irresponsible. Some of them are very interesting. For example, one looks at the relationship between, do you have solar capacity? Or you have solar exposure or not? There's a lot of interesting aspects to this that I think need to be looked at. I'm worried about, things that we might want to put in here by further understanding and further study. Should we require pre-wiring for battery backup systems in terms of as part of a REACH code? Should we require charging stations? A lot of these EV charging stations in new construction. That's not in here. I think that kind of thing maybe is worth thinking about. Are we going to make sure that I want to ban, if it's feasible or not a hardship, I would like to have the presumption of banning liquid fuel backup generators. I wouldn't want to drive more backup generating into liquid fuels that's more polluting than natural gas by, inadvertent not thinking things through. Battery backup is not ready in all circumstances right now, and some commercial applications require engine backup systems. I'd rather have them be less polluting than more polluting. So I just want to make sure that we think this through. And I think that the approach of really understanding what we're adopting and thinking it through makes more sense than just doing something that's sort of blanket without really understanding the specific consequences of a blanket approach.
Susan, and then Randy.
Well, I just want to make sure that the Climate Committee has an opportunity to respond. I think that's appropriate under the circumstances.
Yeah, are they here? I don't see them on the screen now.
Mayor Johnson, this is Gail. I moved them back into the attendee area. I can move them back in unless there's one in particular you want to call on. Otherwise, I can, however you'd like.
All back in?
Okay, yeah. I'll go ahead.
Now, have they been able to hear the discussion that we had?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, if you'll bring them back, and then Susan asks a question.
Are they coming?
The magic go?
It goes slower than we'd like.
Oh, here we go. Yeah, I see.
I don't have a specific question. I wanted them to be able to respond to the issues that were raised, where carve outs versus the appeals process, and whatever. I'd like you to give you the opportunity to respond to what you heard, assuming you heard it.
Right. So, who would like to go, or would anybody?
Well, go because
am I all out here on the limb by myself?
What is your reasoning for not having carve-outs?
Well, I think that Randy has talked about why doesn't this apply to significant remodels? It's a good point, a good question, and ultimately probably should be. And Bill has some good concerns about things like generators that are really kind of outside what we're dealing with here in the REACH code. And again, I just recommend that you start somewhere with a basic, simple, straightforward, all electric in new construction. Don't sit here and spend the rest of the year trying to figure out what carve outs you might want to have and get it implemented, and with the idea that we're addressing an emergency here, and moving towards all electric buildings is the way to go. I think you could complicate this easily, and you don't really need to.
I'll go ahead and add to that, because I think to the extent that we know that we're talking about relatively few new buildings, it really makes very little sense to agonize and spend a lot of time and churning trying to anticipate the need for carve-outs that may or may not in fact be needed. So, to that end, a simple, straightforward approach where we see what few carve-outs might be needed or could be justified makes a whole lot more sense. When we talk about unintended consequences, there are huge prospects for unintended consequences for putting in carve-outs that may not be well conceived. So I just think the easiest and most straightforward thing to do now is to do that. I'd also like to address Ryan's concern about affordability, because I agree with him completely that Ojai both is a leader in environmental justice and in general environmental programs, and that affordability is an issue. And I think, Amy could address again the requirement in a REACH code is that it be in fact cost effective in construction. That is a fundamental requirement, and as inevitably will happen, that gas use in the state of California must be decreased, and must be decreased relatively rapidly. As that happens, the remaining infrastructure, the fixed costs for that are going to be borne by those who are remaining as customers in gas. So that the separation in costs are going to get wider, particularly since it's now less expensive to build solar and wind than it is conventional power plants. So I just don't see any scenario by which this is going to be more costly. It is almost by definition less costly.
Okay, other questions of the committee? Ryan.
I just want to say, and I appreciate it, Steve, and I've had a long conversation with Steve and Brian Hawley and everybody about this, and I do want to say I genuinely appreciate so much the work of the committee. We titled it emergency. This is appropriate for them responding to an emergency. I understand. I in my research couldn't find any contractors who indicated that the costs overall today, when they looked at them and their understanding of them, were less, not necessarily on the installation, but in the continual use. And I'm not quite there yet. I think I have a different concurrence on the fact of those ongoing costs. And I think that's where I am today. That's why
Ryan, what did the contractors have to do with the ongoing cost?
Well,
is it to maintain
well, what they all said was, one, they don't put in electric unless a client asks for it, because they know that that it's not as cost effective. They did believe that they might make more money on some of the installations, even though I understand that it would be less because there's not a plumber. When you're talking about the GC who might be installing the electric as well, it gets a little confusing about the actual direct cost for them. But the use costs was what was indicated to me as being significantly more in the near-term future, that people aren't clamoring for electric, because I do believe the general public is going to go through the path of least resistance to build something new that is cheaper. And that is what the consensus of a number of contractors I talked to was, that they are not pushing, and they're not asking, and their clients aren't asking for all electric because of that.
Okay, well, I could introduce you to some other contractors, but I'm sure that there are a lot of them that feel just like you said they do. Phil.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Phil.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Johnny. Well, Ryan, I think it is important to address cost effectiveness, and I'd like to bring Amy in here, because in putting this REACH code together, we have relied on economic analysis that's been performed that shows that construction and operating costs both are lower with all electric buildings. And Amy, I mean, could you maybe comment on those economic studies that have been done? Because that's what we're basing our recommendations on. This has been done.
Yeah, happy to do so, Phil. So the way that there's a statewide study that looks at each climate zone individually and how both the initial cost and the operational costs apply across multiple building types. And the simple answer is that because you have such an extreme amount of savings from infrastructure avoided by not installing natural gas pipelines and the piping in the house, the meters and so forth, that offsets the operational costs that may be slightly additive over time. But with all of the single family and low rise multifamily construction that is now required to have solar actually makes the cost differential quite positive because it is offsetting the cost over the course of the life of the building. And that cost effectiveness study takes into account any replacement values and so forth. And they actually interviewed contractors in order to come to those conclusions. So that's information I have. I'm happy to refer you to more detail or answer specific questions in the studies themselves, which are in the appendix. But that's the kind of the long and short of it, is that while there might be some additive cost when you don't have solar, the solar makes the difference for cost effectiveness.
Okay. Sousa had her hand up, and then we're going to go to Bill. Sousa, you're muted. You're muted.
Sorry. Amy addressed some of my what was in my mind, but I want to ask the council members who are in doubt about adopting the recommendation by our climate committee, please consider the hidden cost and the long-term cost of not moving forward with this. Think about that. And that's something you cannot put a monetary cost on. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but it makes sense to me.
Yeah, okay. Bill's next, and then Randy. Bill?
Real quick question. Amy, my quick read, I mean, I didn't have time to read all 125 pages of that cost effect, but I tried to skim it as best I could. And I think your statements are absolutely correct for new construction. Absolutely. There's a little bit more of a ambiguity when it gets into retrofit, and the retrofit, it's like fire sprinklers. Putting a fire sprinkler in a new building is an entirely different situation than fire sprinkling retrofits. So I think where I'm coming from is really the issue of not just I have no issue with the standalone, you're starting from scratch, new construction. It's just that I'm worried about crafting this in a way that meets the needs of our competing goals in our community in terms of other than just straight up starting with a bare lot new construction. I want to make sure we're thinking things through properly. That's all.
Okay.
So if I may address an earlier question, just based on the code proposal that Councilmember Haney proposed, you had asked a question about the definition of new construction in this case. And according to attachment B, a covered project under this particular ordinance as written is a newly constructed residential or non-residential building for which one or more building permit is required for construction as set forth in your Title 9 building regulations. So the definition of new construction actually lives within your building department.
Except you said one or more permits required for the building activity?
Correct, under energy code.
Yeah, that includes more than just standalone, starting with bare dirt construction.
It does include for most cities, and I have to refer to your building official for the specifics, for a major renovation, so that if there's a certain percentage of overall construction that is
usually
redone.
That's 50. Usually that's 50%. Usually.
Okay, Randy, and then Ryan.
Just two thoughts here. First of all, I believe that there's two proposals before us tonight.
Now, there's one motion, though.
Right. On the motion, there's one, but there's two proposals.
Yeah.
So I don't think anyone out there in the public that's listening to this is thinking that this council does not want to enact a reach code. It's the opinion of how we want to enact it, I think, is what's being debated. That's the first thing. I guess the only thing that what I just heard kind of concerns me, and Amy, please don't take this the wrong way, but I just heard you say you wrote this ordinance. Am I correct? That you wrote this draft?
I assisted with the draft based on your comments from the last council meeting. That is correct.
But you wrote it. So again, I asked this question the last time. What if we had Southern California Gas come and had one of their reps write us one? You know, I guess I struggle with that.
Why?
Because I'll tell you why. Because what I expected from the climate committee is for them to bring back to us the pros and cons of what we're trying to achieve. And what we've received is the pros today. Now, fortunately, most of us are leaning in that direction, but it's not necessarily what we asked for. We wanted to be able to have a quantitative discussion and debate. And the reality is we're getting one side of this discussion. So that to me is a gray area.
So you want to hear from oil and gas? Is that what you're saying?
What I'd like to hear for some of these questions that we're asking regarding costs. And like I said earlier, I think one of the driving mechanisms behind a higher cost on construction is bringing in the gas lines. When you start purchasing equipment, all electric equipment, again, to the research that I performed, is more expensive than gas equipment. So there's a lot here that's going on, and it's just not fair to say one side's 100% right and the other side's 100% wrong. I think what we're trying to do here is transition from one type of energy to another type. So until we achieve that 100% transition, we're going to keep having these discussions and keep having these debates. So again, how do we want to achieve it in this community? I'll go back to it. One, you got to have community buy-in. Two, an incentive way of doing it is a heck of a lot better than force feeding something down someone's throat. We haven't had the buy-in yet. 30 people writing in, and is not 7,500 people. So there's a lot more educationally that has to be done. So I understand that we want to achieve something tonight. Mayor, I'd be willing to vote on your proposal. I don't think it's going to pass. And I think Plan B, which is the one that the city manager and our city attorney wrote, will more than likely pass. We will achieve a reach code tonight. I know we will.
Plan B.
So let's figure out how we're going to get there.
Okay, so you're wanting a substitute motion. Well, we might as well go ahead and vote on the first one, and then you can make the motion for Plan A. Okay.
Could we restate the motion before we vote, please?
The motion is to approve of the recommendation from the climate committee and to schedule a public hearing on the ordinance that would implement that. And that would still give another 30, 60 days for people to continue to weigh in. And even, like I say, you've been talking about fences and hedges probably for a decade. So something as important as the climate change, I don't think can afford to last that long.
Just Mayor, clarification, please, then on the motion. Does your motion include staff taking what was submitted in attachment B and translating that into?
No, that's attachment A.
No, the attachment B is your motion, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Attachment B is not in the structure of Ojai Municipal Code. Are you including staff rewriting that in terms of Ojai Municipal Code?
Well, whatever the city attorney would need to tweak what has been presented by the climate committee in order to make it into an ordinance.
So that's part of your motion, is for staff to rewrite it in terms of Ojai Municipal Code?
To prepare the ordinance for a public hearing in accordance with all of our codes. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Should we go ahead and vote on this, and then we can get on to whatever's next? Okay. Gail, would you call the roll?
Mayor Pro Tem Blatz?
No.
Councilmember Francina,
Yes.
Councilmember Haney,
No.
Mayor Johnston,
Yes.
Councilmember Wyrick.
You had to do that to me. Too much ambiguity. No, I want some more specificity.
Okay, we're back to Randy now. What is it that you wanted to propose?
So we had the proposal that our city manager wrote and our city attorney wrote. Is that? I'm looking at the copies that I received.
Attachment A is that.
Attachment
Thank you. So then I'm going to move that we proceed with attachment A, and
in what fashion, Randy?
30 days for a second reading.
You want to introduce as a first reading tonight?
Yes.
I'll second.
I'd still like an opportunity to speak, Mr. Mayor.
Brian?
In the last go around. If all these things were true, we wouldn't have to have an ordinance. We wouldn't. If this was absolutely clear to everybody that this was cheaper and better and cleaner and healthier, and all of these benefits were not outweighed by any negativity.
And you wouldn't have to be a lawyer and go to court because everybody would recognize.
I disagree, Mr. Mayor. I disagree. We don't have to tell people to build. You know what? We don't tell them to build their houses by wood. They don't build them out of cinder block. They could, but they don't because it's cheaper. I believe that the market is telling us where this is. I'm not there yet. I would rather us put an ordinance out there to make the symbolic effort that's been described to us and have carve-outs that we can review after 6 months. I know it's difficult, but the reality of Ojai is the customization of these types of rules is why we've had to debate hedges and fences and these other things. It only may be 3 square miles that we're really talking about, with one being the golf courses, but there is enough ambiguity in the community to require some customization in the ordinance. And this is the same path we went down with our garden equipment, and we were not in a consensus. We let it happen. We let see what was going on. We reviewed it again, and we were still on the front line of it. 35 communities have done something. We're not asking to do something significantly different than some of those other 35, but a lot of those 35 have done something very consistent with what we're talking about with carve-outs, with the understanding that we can increase it and dial it in to be right for our community later. So I would support that. So even the written motion, I have a couple other carve-outs I'd like to include before I would be in approval.
Susan?
Well, what Ryan said doesn't make sense to me because this is so clean, it applies to new construction. It's not retrofitting. So I don't know what the concern is about carve-outs. I really don't understand that at all. Plus, I want to, Randy made the comment that 30 people is not representatives, but many of these people represent a membership of several thousand, including citizens in Ojai. So it's not just 30 people. We had a very strong support from the public as expressed in the 30 letters that we received.
Well, yeah, and I think it really gets back to the inconvenient truth. I don't know that there's anybody here in their heart that in this discussion that doesn't think that the carbon emissions is a real existential threat to future generations, and you got to start someplace.
Yeah.
There are some people I know and that live in town, so there are different points of view that, as they say, they never had a woolly mammoth for a pet and they don't miss them. And they think that the world is changing and the climate's changing and there's nothing we can do about it. So if you buy into that, then you don't do it. But what the climate committee has provided us with is the simplest, cleanest, straightforward, and the easiest thing then to shape to deal with all of these uncertainties of the future without hurting anybody who is currently here. And worried about the price of things. I watched a house up the street from me build a huge wall in their front yard, put in a swimming pool, and took a house that they paid about $900,000 for and put it on the market for close to $2 million. So that's good. That kind of thing that seems to me is separate from the rest of this issue. I think we at some point we have to say we're going to do something. I appreciate Randy's motion.
Mayor, I just want to add to that because again, I've tried making this clear to everyone. There's no good guys and bad guys here. Susan, I appreciate you trying to clarify my statement. I wasn't vilifying anybody. I'm just saying that we need to educate the public. All right. So that's what I'm saying. We're going to get a reach code here tonight. I think we need to understand that. And we need to accept that anything that we do tonight is not going to be perfect. But I think if you listen to the three, to William and to Ryan, and even to what Johnny just said, that we're in agreement that we need to do something, and we need to do it better than what we're doing right now. And I think we're going to achieve that. I have no problem, Ryan, if you want to make an amendment that we come back after 6 months of this passing and review this. And maybe at that point in time, we can add more to it. But I'd like to see a document like this to be living, that we're constantly adding to it, that we're constantly identifying what we can do better as a community, and get the community to buy in when we do it.
Okay, are we ready to vote on that? Bill?
Real quick, Randy. So your motion, speaking to the issue of buy-in and vetting and so on and so forth, your motion is to introduce the staff recommendation as tonight as a first reading, and then it comes back for second reading. May I amend your motion? This might give me a little bit of comfort, because there's changes I'm going to make on this one, that it come back as a full agendized item and not as a consent agenda item for second reading.
What difference does that make?
You have a right to make a motion for an amendment.
You can always pull it off the calendar too, Bill. I mean,
Well,
I understand that. I'm just asking Randy whether the default would be fully agendized for second reading or not.
No, we can. I can go to your recommendation, Bill, if you'd like that. Again, what we can't have is another 3-hour discussion the next
right.
time.
What is the recommendation that he was asking? Or what did you say, Bill? I didn't get your recommendation.
Well, usually second readings are consent agenda.
Oh,
and I want to make sure there's an opportunity without having, the default is a full community vetting. And I'm going to have suggestions. Mr. Summers has his hands up. I apologize.
If I may, just to remind the council and the public who's watching in the committee, if the council makes significant substantive changes to an ordinance after introduction, then it has to be reintroduced. We saw that a few times with the fences ordinance.
Right.
So there's nothing to stop how you put it for second reading, but recognize that's going to necessarily force another second reading, which is of course fine. But if your goal is to do it, quicker, you might make the changes tonight. If your goal is to engender further public process, then you could introduce and then adjust next time, which would then trigger another second reading.
I'm just trying to thread the needle here, because I don't think any of us want to get into every single thing tonight.
Right. And Matt, who makes that decision? Who makes the decision on when you've added or changed the ordinance enough that it needs to be
reintroduced?
The official decision falls to the elected city clerk. In her absence, it would fall to the deputy city clerk and the council, with my advice. And generally it's tested by, is the matter substantive or is it much more minor? Fixing typos, fixing minor changes, or does it change the nature of the ordinance?
Okay.
Well, and the council themselves could decide that they have made sufficient change that in due process and fairness to the public, that it be reintroduced.
I withdraw my suggestion. Any one of us can pull it from consent.
Ryan.
Pursuant to Mr. Haney's recommendation, I would ask to amend the amendment to include carve-outs for new restaurants as well as pool applications, and as well as a 6-month sunset clause with a date certain that the council reviews this again in approximately 6 months to review what we found out so far and decide if we want to amend the amendment to that. So that would be my requested amendment to the motion.
Okay.
I have no problem with that.
Let's slow that. Sounds like you asked for more than one thing in your amendment. What you're saying?
I would add restaurants as a carve out, because I believe new restaurant applications in town are potentially negatively affected by this under the current consensus. I also believe pool applications, whether they're retrofit or new, have another issue that we understand is a concern. I would add those as carve outs to the current proposed motion, the proposed ordinance by the staff, and include, in addition to that, a 6-month sunset clause with a date certain that the council would review this to come back and determine whether they
sunset clause on what?
On this particular ordinance, so that we would have a 6-month. In 6 months, we would have to review it to decide whether we want to extend it, continue it, or get rid of it.
Or that opportunity without a sunset. That just.
Well, in all fairness, Mr. Mayor, I've talked to the climate committee. That was something I brought up to them. It was not received poorly. I don't know if they have a consensus.
You're right tonight with the climate.
But I can tell you, I talked to Steve and Brian, and they thought that might be a good idea in lieu of some of these amendments I've requested.
Mayor, isn't it, point of order, isn't it the motion maker's option to either accept or not accept the amendment to his motion?
And I believe Randy indicated he did.
Because the second to the main motion has the right to have something to say too. We're turning this into such a mishmash. What is the climate committee? Is there somebody there that will like to weigh in and say whether that this is even worth doing if we're going to chop it up this way?
Well,
Seems like it's deliberately.
I have to say something. Each one of us appointed a member of the climate committee for their expertise. They have spent a year on this and given us their expert opinion. And we're not experts in this field. You know, we have concerns. They have given us a very clean ordinance option. And I can't support all of this confusion. And I do want the climate committee to have an opportunity to address what's being said.
Well, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
So one thing I wanted to say is I definitely understand all your points. As Ryan said, we've talked about this. He has some, really important points about whether or not this is affordable going down the line. I think it's, like we started off this meeting, it's very much symbolic in that we're taking the first steps forward. And I think, after the last year that Sousa just brought up, we put a lot of work into this. And so when Randy said that we should come up with a cost benefit analysis and, stuff like that, I mean, we're here donating our time to help out for an important cause. So, I mean, I don't know what more you guys need out of us, but we've worked really hard. I could tell you, Michelle has really given a lot of hard work to this. Phil has been super dedicated. Steve has given us so much of his time and drafted these documents. And, we're impassioned about it. We care about it. But at the same time, we understand that, there are issues that come up. And there were things that come up with policy and with, working in a small town like we do. That said, I would really like to make the point that this is an important step forward. And, if we're arguing about the height of hedges, like as an example we were talking about earlier, I feel like we're getting maybe into the weeds on an issue that's more, it's a much bigger issue. It's a much more important thing that even if we make some mistakes and we have to correct them, that's what we do. And so the same discussions we could be having about whether or not we should do this, we could have discussions down the road whether or not we should have done this. Anyway, that's my point.
Yeah, you are correct, Brian, that this is a very important issue, and all of the things that are being suggested for carve-outs and what have you is the reason why we get very little done in the town, and we still have a legal right to change this. We can change it in 3 months if we wanted to. We can't even get it adopted in 3 months the way we're going. And it seems like most of the questions, what about this and what about that, either are related to a specific thing, because Mark Whitman sent a letter. I don't know if everybody got a copy of the letter. He's an architect. My son's a contractor. I talked to a lot of people. I was a builder over in Arizona where they didn't have any gas coming to the track, and the people didn't want it. I realized there are different cultural norms in places, and they were worried about the explosions caused by natural gas. But the fact is you can't get any cleaner and any simpler than what we just turned down and we'd still have plenty of opportunity to keep amending it and to change it. And if there's a restaurant out there that wants to build, and I assume it's going to be a new restaurant in a new building, I'm not sure where that's going to go, but if it's simply just adapting an old building, that is okay. There's gas already there. So I'm not quite sure why we're doing this, other than if you don't want to do something, I guess one excuse is as good as another. And I'm getting testy. Bill, did you have something you wanted to say?
No, I think we have a motion on the unamended motion at this point for consideration. Okay. And I'm not sure where that stands, but I'd like to clarify what's on the floor right now.
Okay. Brian, did you make an amendment?
I just want to say, Mr. Mayor, in response to what you said, I agree with you. I think we're just looking at this in two different ways to try and get to the same place. Do we go aggressive and rescind based on what we hear? Or do we go a little weaker and increase based on what we find out? And I think we're just approaching the same problem with two different strategies. At this point, I prefer the strategy of starting small and working up versus working big and then adapting lower, because I'm concerned about the unintended consequences by a more aggressive motion or a more aggressive ordinance. We're talking about
what is aggressive? What is
why do you use that word
Just a minute,
aggressive?
Susan, let me ask the question. What is aggressive about saying from this point forward, we are going to stop digging the hole deeper? And then if we learn that we can use a deeper hole, or that we can slow it down in some fashion and still solve these other problems, it seems to me that's not aggressive. That's probably about as tempered a way you could approach a problem. And we did that all in the history of California in the modern age, has been doing exactly that with land use and all of the laws. And if there's somebody who comes to town and says, hey, wait a minute, you've just done something that I've got a really great proposal for you here, and I can't do it because of your stupid law. We can sit down and look at the stupid law, as they refer to it, and say, okay, what would we need to do? And is it worth the trade-off in order to be sure we get your great new idea for whether it be a restaurant or whatever else they want to propose? But if we don't do anything, and that's what it sounds like we're going to do, is nothing, then anybody who comes in, they build under the old code, and then you get into the whole retrofit. If you're concerned about the cost of this thing, retrofitting is much more expensive, and everybody who is in the business knows that. So why keep digging the hole deeper?
Let me answer your question.
Back and let Ryan answer. I kind of pounded on him.
I completely understand. We're just looking at the same issue from different sides. I think we agree on the fundamentals, because the way I look at it is, if they're going to be cost effective, they're going to unilaterally understand that and decide that for themselves. I don't think we have to force it. I don't think we need to at this point. And there's not a consensus about exactly how this is going to impact everyone. There's a little bit of difference there. And what I'm trying to change is just say, let's learn more. And you saying we're not going to do anything, I don't think is correct, because Mr. Haney said it. Mr. Wyrick is not against it. The three of us that voted against the motion that didn't pass, we all are in favor of making sure there is a clear indication that we are putting something on the books that creates, if nothing more, I think a specific rule that can apply to new construction independently. It still would, even though there's carve-outs, it still would apply to a non-exempt carve-out to that situation. But it's not doing anything, Mr. Mayor. I don't agree with that. It's saying it's all or nothing. It's that we're making it clear on the books that it's recommended. And because that recommendation is there, and when you look at the process for actually doing any of these things, it's going to be an incentivization to the individual applicant who wants to do this to include all electric as being something that's going to help them get approval through the process, even though it's not mandatory. And at this point, I think that's the appropriate strategy.
We are looking at it entirely differently. I'm not looking upon it as somebody to say on an individual project that this is good for my client or this is good for my investors or whatever. It is not good for the planet, because what we're attempting to do here is to join the choir who realizes what is happening to the environment, to the air quality, and to the temperature of this valley. And it's not going to be decided individually by particular investors in a free market model. I think that's a great idea. When I was a builder, I liked that, but I didn't necessarily make all my decisions based on community values. I based them on financial reasons and what my investors wanted. And that wasn't necessarily in the best interest of the total community. And I think that's what we're faced with now.
But it's only in a situation where the investor would be, or whoever it is.
Yeah, Randy has his hand up.
But that's only if they're eligible for an exemption as well. I mean, it does have to fit into a specific category.
Right. Randy.
Okay. You know what what's special about this community is being able to have a discussion like this.
Yeah, right.
I mean, really, there's, in a normal environment right now, first of all, the climate committee would not be a part of this discussion because this had gone back to council and we're in deliberation right now. So I appreciate the fact that we've opened this up and that we're allowing all the voices of quote, the 5 experts that we all appointed to this committee. And I know we all strongly, as each council person strongly agrees with that statement, that we asked for people that we thought that would be, that we felt would be thoughtful and thorough and considerate and think about community. And I don't want this conversation to leave that room. We all appreciate all that's been done to this point. We're going to have a reach code tonight, and we're going to be able to build on that reach code tonight. Either or, we're going to be able to build on it. We're going to be able to make this community better. I'd like to get the vote done. I'll accept Ryan's amendment, but I think we're at a point where we can make a decision.
Well, with Ryan's amendment, I don't know what we're voting on.
Yeah. I'm not voting for something I don't understand and it doesn't make any sense to me.
Do the members of the climate committee understand what we would be voting on? And if they think it's a good idea, I'll support it. But if they don't understand it any better than I do, I think that.
So I'll just address, the proposed sunset clause. I believe that Ryan has asked for. My concern with that would be a 6-month duration. This is going to take however many months for the CEC to review and approve and then to take effect, and how much new building are we going to have in that amount of time, and be able to actually run the cost effectiveness studies for that individual project. It's a lifetime cost effectiveness study. So I just don't think we're going to have any more new information regarding kind of the implications on cost than we do today. So I don't understand how that would be of benefit. And if anything, I would suggest that if new information emerges over time, absolutely come back and modify your ordinance. But to automatically sunset it out in a short amount of time, I would not advise. And then and if I appreciate, Randy, your desire to get a reach code done, and we would support that. We as a committee do have some concerns with the exceptions articulated in attachment A, which is the version you're proposing. And we could provide just a short response to our take, but obviously you will move forward as you wish. But we do have some, recommendations on those proposed exceptions, like the affordable housing deed restricted units and the replacement stationary emergency generators and the ADUs, which require an electrical upgrade panel. So we have, rationale as to why we would not suggest those if you're open to hearing that.
Can we hear those? Can we hear the rationale?
Point of order, usually if we're deliberating, first of all, we find out whether we have a second to the proposed amendment before we deliberate on it.
We already voted on that other motion. We already voted on that before and it didn't go through. So we're either looking at something different or we're not looking at anything at all.
No, she's now addressing what is in A. Not B is off the table now.
Right. So, well, actually, it's an amendment we are currently deliberating on, which an amendment's been suggested for which there's no second. So, shouldn't we wait for a second before we debate the amendment?
I think that's what the amendment. We don't even know what it. Is anybody seconding it? I don't know.
That's my point.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good point.
Amendment requires a second for debate. If there's no second, then you may move forward.
That's my point of order.
Okay, you are correct. I stand corrected. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, there is no amendment then, so we've got the main motion going.
Well, is there a second to the amendment?
Mr. Mayor, hold on. I made the amendment. Randy accepted it as the first party. And
okay. I didn't hear that.
No. Did Randy second it?
He accepted.
My acceptance is considered a second. That should be the second.
I stand corrected. So it is an accepted amendment. Okay.
According to the parliamentary law, the main motion was made with a second. What I seconded was not what is now being proposed.
Right. We voted that down, Mr. Mayor. Randy accepted. Your motion was voted down. It was 3-2 against.
No. I seconded.
I could jump in.
Okay.
Parliamentary inquiry to Matthew, please.
If I could jump in here. So the main motion that's on the table is to introduce the ordinance to Exhibit A, exactly as drafted by staff. Right. An amendment had been proposed by Councilmember Blatz that would have added 2 exceptions in the sunset clause. That amendment was initially accepted by the maker of the main motion, but because the seconder of the main motion declined to accept it, that does not automatically get incorporated. However, I heard from Councilmember Haney, and I'll ask him to confirm that he seconded the amendment from Councilmember Blatz. If that's the case,
who did?
Then that amendment is on the table as a motion and a second as an amendment to the main motion.
Slow down, Matt. Who seconded?
I heard Councilmember Haney seconded, but I'd like to have him confirm.
I'm confirming that.
Okay, so we vote on the amendment. It's not a substitute motion. Let's vote on the amendment. Let's have a roll call.
But at what point does the climate committee get to inform us why they don't recommend that? Because I don't know what I'm not.
Well, we can't have them weigh. Well,
actually, the climate committee as a committee can weigh in whenever they want and send any information or any.
Would you like to hear from them, Randy? You're the maker of the motion now.
No, I think this has gone on long enough. I think that any of the members of the climate committee that would like to talk to us between now and in the 6-month.
Well, why don't we talk to them right now?
Has more than enough opportunity to talk. In fact, I would expect them to.
You know, my understanding, may I say something, Mayor?
Yes, please do.
My understanding was that if we had adopted B as the ordinance recommended by our expert climate committee, that then staff would have come back with an ordinance and there would have been a public hearing. It seems to me that you're moving actually faster than we would have been moving if we had adopted B. Am I correct? Because this now you're saying that we're coming back. If you approve option A, then it's going to come back for a second reading already?
Point of order on that. I believe that given Mr. Blatz's suggestions for amending, I believe it would meet the bar of having to come back as another introduced first reading, given the amendment that Mr. Blatz suggested. Mr. Summer, am I correct on that or not?
Well, tonight's up for introduction. You could introduce the ordinance in Exhibit A with the adjustments as proposed in the amendment.
Thank you. So we could make this a first reading then. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but
just a minute. Okay. Let Matt finish.
Yeah, so you could introduce it tonight with those amendments.
Which amendment?
Also set it for another hearing.
Which
you could do
the
both.
ones that the staff and you wrote, or the one that Ryan just proposed that we've never seen?
Well, we would go through, if the amendment was passed, we would add exemptions, and I suppose we should clarify those, but you could introduce it with those exemptions. That's sufficiently clear.
But somebody needs to make it clear. All we're hearing is that, we're not in the same room. We don't have anything written out. Now, I understand that Ryan wanted a sunset provision, and that was, I guess, acceptable to Randy. I mean, it seems like we've totally gutted the whole thing.
Well, just to clarify, the sunset's not about killing it. The sunset's about reviewing it, and it doesn't have to be a sunset clause. We can put it on calendar as a date certain to review it again. I'm okay with however we want to do that. It was described to me when I brought this idea up to the climate committee. It was referred to me back as a sunset clause. I don't know what else it would be called, but I just want to make sure.
Mandatory review.
Yeah, yes, exactly, Mr. Wyrick. again, this is not a all or nothing and we're all against each other or for each other, which I feel like this is all becoming this weird, this dynamic of we're for this or against. We're all for trying to get a reach code together tonight. I think that my motion is intended to be a small step rather than a bigger step and backwards versus a small step.
Could you repeat what it is you said in your amendment that Randy
it would be the same section that includes exclusions, but with added to it, restaurants not being required to have to go to all electric, as well as pool, any situations regarding pools that would not have to be going to electric. And then a mandatory review of the ordinance at 6 months with a date certain on the calendar where we can come back and decide whether to make any adjustments.
Okay, well, I don't understand the last part. The first, you're saying swimming pools and the restaurants are so important that they need to be carved out. And
I don't.
That's the amendment.
Mayor, I am not understanding why this council could not have done the same process that they're proposing now with option B. For the life of me, I can't understand that.
They could have.
Because we could have adopted B and then.
Right, but you are correct, Susan. You are correct, but we didn't have 3 votes. That's why.
Well,
so now doing.
Can I make a motion?
What? We have a motion on the floor.
Have to do that motion.
Yeah, are you wanting to amend the motion? Because there's still an amendment.
I want to amend the motion that you revisit option B and then with that same process.
That's a motion of reconsideration. That can't be. Okay. Randy's motion's on the floor. Ryan's amendment was accepted by Randy, and in effect, the only way the second to the main motion can express himself is being forced into voting against the whole thing, which I'm not going to do. Is there anything else we can do to muddy the water before we vote?
No, let's vote.
Okay. Okay, Gail, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Wyrick?
Yes.
Councilmember Haney?
Yes.
Councilmember Francina?
Yes. I mean, no. No.
Mayor Pro Tem Blatz?
Yes.
Mayor Johnston?
Yes. And what we just voted on was, as Randy said, a reach amendment that will be put before the council in a public hearing and will then be reviewed in 6 months later, should it be passed, to see what effect it has. Maybe every 6 months you should be reviewing your ordinances to see what they've done.
I don't disagree with that, Mayor.
So when we leave here, my understanding is, if this is correct, Matt, is that the staff, you and James, will prepare the draft. It will be scheduled for a public hearing, as any ordinance would be. Is that correct?
Vote was to introduce the ordinance.
Right.
Right, introduce the ordinance, but you will take this mess we have, well, maybe it's not a mess, but what we have done just orally will be written down and incorporated.
Yes.
It will return in full written form to council for council to adopt, if desired, or adjust, or not adopt.
Right, at a public hearing so that the public can weigh in on this, right?
Well, it wouldn't traditionally be a notice public hearing, but we can make it a notice public hearing. That would be council's choice.
It'll come back as a second reading, Mayor.
That was the motion that was adopted.
Yeah, it'll come back as a second reading, which any one of us can pull from the consent and have a full public hearing on if we want.
Okay.
That's more likely what's going to happen.
And I'll state today,
if we know that's going to happen, why not put it on the agenda so the public is more clear that they can make comments?
Well, that was my suggestion, not accepted.
Well, what I believe 2 of us right now, before it ends up on a consent calendar on the next agenda, can say we would like it to be on the public hearing calendar now. And we can vote on that separately. It wasn't part of the motion, but I'm happy to. I would support that right now if we need.
I will second that. Good, Ryan. We agree.
Okay.
Well, we have 2 requests for full. Yeah. Okay.
I want to do that.
It's not going to be on consent.
Sounds like
one way
we
or
reached
another.
an agreement on the reach.
Yeah. Okay.
You called it, Randy. You nailed it.
Let's move on.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to thank you guys.
Thank you.
The city for adopting a reach code. Way
Yes.
to go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now there's 36 of us in the state of California.
Not quite, but we're almost there. Okay, James, I won't ask you if you're comfortable with it, but you understand where we're going with it?
Yeah, we're clear on the direction.
Okay. Okay, thank you, guys.
I'll be back soon.
Mud wrestling. Okay.
What do they say about making sausage, Mayor?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was starting to think about the happened to my.
You know, Bill, they say that about laws too, right?
This is a law.
I know.
I was thinking about the Affordable Care Act.
Oh.
That'll end up before the Supreme Court. Okay.
That might be short-lived.
Yeah. Okay, James, next.
So next on the agenda is the return from 2 weeks ago of the Ventura County Mass Care and Shelter Plan. We reviewed this more in depth at that meeting. Just to briefly summarize, this is the new county-wide plan for operation of shelters and coordinating responsibilities between cities and the county. And so we talked 2 weeks ago, and we talked about some potential concerns that the city had. We had a series of meetings with county staff over the last 2 weeks and worked out an addendum that I am comfortable with and am recommending that we execute the agreement and sign on. We are the last city to sign on. So with us signing on, it would be all cities in Ventura County.
We have a motion.
And
move approval. Yep. Move approval.
Got a second?
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Okay, any discussion on that? James?
Just a thank you, Mayor.
Good job, James.
Mayor, just a thank you to staff for getting in what we wanted. Good job. And and thank you for the due diligence. Nice job.
Absolutely.
Thank you for bringing it to everyone's attention. Important. Okay. Do we need a roll call on that or just without objection? Where's Matt? Did he leave us?
Yeah, no, I'm here, of course. Does not need a roll call. Just
okay.
Fine.
Okay, well, a voice vote. All in favor? Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? None opposed. Okay, motion carries. James, next item. Coronavirus.
Last item on the agenda is very brief. I'll keep it very brief. It's the coronavirus response item. And let me pull up. I believe you can see my screen now, but just a brief update today. I think the main thing, we won't go through the statistics. I think, it's late in the night to get into the real specific numbers, but I did think this information is useful. I met with County Public Health actually this afternoon and talked to them about, we have heard questions from people about the number of cases in the 93023 zip code. So we got some specifics, and they also walked us through the how to get some more accurate reporting. And so I am trying to pull this up, but this slide here that is also available on VC Recovers, you can type in a zip code and get some specific information. I thought this was useful and informative. It shows that the 93023 zip code actually includes 20,000 people. So we've had a lot of people ask, is that number of cases, which so far the total cases has been identified as 148. And I've had people ask, is that the city of Ojai specifically? And the answer is no, it actually includes a much larger population. It's the full 93023, which is about—
That's 148 cases out of 20,000 people.
Mm-hmm. And to date at this point, so not 148 right now, but 148 total. And we had been hearing about, people were asking about a spike. And so this chart does show that, you could see from the start through June, we were, at most one case, every couple of days. So I think now that people are seeing a case or two every day, it is a noticeable increase over, what we were seeing in March, April, May. But the county made, when I talked to public health, they did say that the city of Ojai has done particularly well. But as we all have talked about at length, is we just have to be careful to kind of continue that trend, because what we're seeing is similar to what people are seeing across the state and across the country, which is cases are increasing just in general. And so you can see as we get into August, September, all of a sudden we're getting 4, 5, 6 cases on some of these dates. So, so the big thing, the big takeaway after that meeting with County Public Health was they said Ojai is doing a good job, and just remember to keep wearing face coverings. Remember to wash your hands and to try to stay out of large groups. So we will keep pushing that message out, and that is kind of the summary. And then the last point quickly is we are working with the county right now, and we'll be announcing this week that we've been able to extend the COVID testing that has provided the opportunity for a lot of people in the Valley to get tested here in Ojai. And so originally it was supposed to end, as you can see in the flyer, on October 26th. We're working on extending it through the rest of the year. And so we will be announcing those dates probably at the end of this week. But we look to have continued testing in the Valley, which I think is important for us here. And so I won't get into much else. We were going to remind everybody about the red flag warning, but it actually ends today. So the short thing related to an emergency is we're entering that enhanced fire season. I think we always say now fire season really is year round, but we're in that period where, the Thomas fire started in December, and I think Woolsey was October, I believe. So we're entering into that period of enhanced risk. So just a reminder to be cautious and sign up for VC alerts now to get ready. So, and that's it. That's the emergency update.
Good job.
Okay, council member reports. Bill.
The Supreme Court is going to take up the Santa Monica case. It's been reported various sources. And that has to do with districting for especially the issue of what, especially as expressed in terms of the Voting Rights Act for small cities. I'm wondering if we, I guess this is really kind of bleeding over into future agenda items. We might want to have a future agenda item where, and I apologize for jumping forward on that, to have Mr. Summers maybe brief us on if we want to get involved in terms of working with the League of California Cities, or what the League of California Cities is doing, and whether or not there's going to be a movement of small city amicus briefs in this litigation or not. I don't know. I just want to maybe think about we might want to put that on the agenda to discuss.
Okay, we'll come back to that then. Do you have a council report, Randy? No. Ryan, do you have one?
Sure. I will quickly say, I would just want to tell James, great job. I know I had been arguing with the county about getting testing up here. The fact it's continued after October is really good news. I think that's a real benefit. I know people who are getting tested. I know some positives, a lot of negatives, but it's very efficient and positive that it's up here. So good job. I know that's never easy dealing with the county and trying to argue with them about that. And from what Bill said, yes, I just want to make it clear to everybody, we are, there's a lot of, I had my neighbor the other day, literally yesterday, ask me about districting and wondering why she couldn't vote in one of the district elections. And, if anybody out there is paying attention, just know this council's not taking it lightly. We're very serious about it. We contested it. We fought it. We have to do it. We had to do with it. We're monitoring it very closely on what's going on. Bill, if I'm correct, based on a Facebook post I saw of you, there's one issue that the court has delineated, right? They really want to know what it means if you are, and I'm going to use the wrong terminology, but essentially neglecting some of the demographics.
Yeah, and what's the test? What is the test for demonstrating that?
And on top of that, the real indication is very strange. And my lawyer brain was like, wow, this is not usual, that they rescinded the Court of Appeal case from publication.
Right,
which could indicate that they're going to change. Also could indicate that they don't want to have any illegitimacy arguments about this particular election. But the public should know that we are not, as a council, in favor of doing anything districting that we don't have to do. And we're only going to do it, we have to do it, that is forced. But we are monitoring it closely, and we will do what's appropriate to support
And
arguing against it in the right.
Right.
level.
And the question is, how can we support arguing against it? Yeah.
That's all.
Okay, Susan, you have a council report?
No, I just want to say that I hope none of you have to endure this districting nonsense the next election.
And I would add that, at one point we talked about trying to balance so that instead of having 4 seats up one time and then 2 because of the mayor being a 2-year term, that maybe there should be some kind of, I don't know how you do it, whether you draw straws or whatever, but there needs to be an adjustment so that I think 2 council districts at least, as long as if we're going to be in council districts, it magnifies the problem that Sousa's coping with. So anyway, that's just something that's
I'm kind of coping with it as well, Mayor. So.
Yeah.
Well, that means somebody either gets
to go into the 2-year cycle, the others maybe. Okay, the city manager's report. Do you have anything you?
Just very briefly, we have 3 items, especially based on tonight, that we will plan to bring back at the next meeting, which is the reach codes item for a public hearing. Hedges, fences, and walls would be coming back, and an update on the Stewart Canyon Restoration Project and the bids. So we will bring those 3 back. And then lastly, I just want to share one image, if you'll bear with me. The mandala was finished, and we are going to try to leave that up here for a bit so people can get out there and check it out. But we just wanted to pull it up real quick so people can kind of get a picture of it. This was from Wednesday, and they were still painting for another day and a half or so. So it even is more than that. So get out there now if you want to check it out. So
there were some great drone shots, James. We may want to try and get our hands on too.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
By the way, the final product looked absolutely amazing. I got to say,
unbelievable.
There may not be a mandala. I'm not going to say it yet, but it may not be at Signal Street next year. This looks so cool.
Yeah.
Other than the space we use for vendors and stuff, it was really beautiful. I mean, it was really amazing. So I just
and a drone shot, the way it interacts with the fountain is just it's really
cool.
Yeah.
Really cool.
Yeah. I think that circle is the one my granddaughter did.
And a shout out for credit to the youth Haney for helping paint it.
All right, that's all I have.
Okay, now we're to future agenda items. Bill, you were.
Yeah, I think we ought to at least have a report of what's going on with the league in terms of putting in arguments, amicus briefs, or whatever in this proceeding, and whether or not we want to participate that in, even to be so bold as maybe we come up with a template brief that other small cities might want to emulate. I don't know the situation, but I want to be as constructive in support of small city interests as possible in this matter.
Yeah.
We'll do.
Future agenda item.
One, I think I heard 2, so we'll do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that one size fits all clearly in this case was a disservice to the voters.
Yes.
Okay. Does anybody else have something they want to add to the agenda next?
I will just say this.
The ATP demonstration starts on the 9th, which is a Monday. And it saddens me that we weren't able to get ahead of it to have a public discussion in council. But why don't we bring that in on the 10th if we can. And again, it's more public awareness and also give the opportunity for the public to weigh in.
You want to volunteer with me on the grid there for volunteer?
Yeah, everybody should take a 2-hour slot.
I actually asked, is it Dana, what's her Hill?
Dana
to actually meet us out here. I imagine she's coming out. She's the person that we're paying her company $500,000 to come out and actually walk the site with me so that we could discuss the implementation. And her attitude was, no, I'm not going to walk it with you, which really disturbed me. In fact, I don't quite understand that. How any person coming into our community doing a project of this magnitude, not wanting to meet with a council person or even a group of council people. So that concerns me.
Well,
That's
why
why
don't we have her come to the council meeting when we're all here rather than, because this is becoming, seems.
So I'm not looking for anyone to defend her. I'm not throwing her under the bus, but I'm disappointed in her attitude towards a council person in this community. So I would like to, if we can, agendize it for the 10th.
Does anybody else want it agendized for that purpose, or is that?
I don't understand. Randy, did you have an opportunity to watch the video where she explained everything in detail the first half hour?
Yeah, it's not the same as walking it, Sousa.
Yeah, I understand that. Maybe there was
So that's all that needs to be understood.
Well, I'm going to hear.
I watched a number of the videos.
I'm going to ask her side of the story. I don't want to leave the I don't think it's right to leave the public with the impression that she's rude. I think there has been a misunderstanding.
Don't get into an argument. Just go talk to her and report back. Anyways, it's a question.
Yeah, why don't you listen? I forwarded the emails to James. Why don't you ask him in private what the conversation was? You'll see it. It wasn't right.
Okay, we've heard that. Okay, and we'll get you an answer. You are entitled to an answer. Yes. Ryan, thank you.
I'm going to make a past council agenda. So anyway, I just want to tell James, the mayor, thank you. I brought up to James about serendipity that happened very quickly. I appreciate it. It didn't end up getting talked about even at a meeting. It happened over such a short period of time. Thank you. I thought that was really cool. And I'll just say, as potential future council items, the reason why that one landed in my lap was I just thought, not only is it really cool, and I found out they'd been here over 40 years, but we have a lot of stuff that's not positive with all of COVID and our budget and everything. So I'll just say that for everybody, represent businesses or any other things that we can do that are positive. It was a great opportunity to do something positive regarding serendipity. So anybody else who has any ideas, I'd be supportive of that if it happens.
Okay, yeah, to underline what Ryan just said, James, if you check with the city of Ventura, I believe, at least when I was helping them down there, that on council meetings, at the beginning of the council meeting, the mayor would hand out some kind of a certificate recognizing new businesses in town or any of that kind of stuff. So between you and Ryan, I think that, that would be a nice thing to let the business community realize, we appreciate what they've gone through as well as what everybody else has gone through.
Yeah, we can specifically coordinate that through Jamie at the chamber too, because the chamber does ribbon cuttings if they happen to be a chamber member as well.
Yeah, I think the chamber would be.
Okay, well, then that brings us to.
I have a question.
Still questions.
Did we address what Randy was asking for the future? He wanted to have. What was it that you wanted to have on the 10th?
Put it on. Are you talking about the ATP?
Yeah. I mean,
Randy suggested having something on the council agenda. I'm not sure exactly what it was, but he pointed out that he had an unhappiness with the way he had been treated, and I thought you were going to contact that person.
Yeah,
and talk.
I didn't know. So I mean, did you have in mind that Dana would do some kind of in-person? Well, it would be on Zoom. What was it you were asking for?
What we need to do is just have an ATP update from council.
I actually thought that could be. I'm going to concur with Randy. If what you're suggesting, Randy, is to have a presentation of, all right, we've kicked this off. This is, it's in process. This is what's happening.
Right.
I think that's great.
Greg Grant can give that update.
Yeah.
James has got it.
Yep, you got it.
You will do that. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, going once, going twice. Good night, everybody.
Good job.
Okay.